I was fired by my own wife, the ruthless CEO, in front of the entire office. 9 years of loyalty, erased in an instant. That night I discovered her affair with my best friend, a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. Our marriage became a battleground, a twisted game of power and revenge. I sued her, exposed her darkest secrets, and watched as her empire crumbled. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a tale of ultimate payback. How far would you go to reclaim your life? Wait, what did you say? Dave was in his wife's office. She was the boss of the division, the top dog. Dave? He was just an account representative, much lower on the ladder. He felt nervous when she started working there, but with many layers of management between them, he thought it would be okay. Maybe not. "Your numbers are way down, Mr. Waxman," she said. "You were the worst performer of the year in your division. I'm afraid we had no choice. X is waiting outside to escort you to your office to collect your things." X was one of their 2 security guards. They always called each other Mr. and Miss at work to keep it professional. She kept her last name for professional reasons, or so she said, but everyone in the office knew they were married. Dave even had a picture of her on his desk, shaking the chairman's hand when she got her promotion. That's it, he thought. 9 years of loyal service, and I'm terminated because my numbers are off? If you had listened to me, you would know, he started. Please stop. The decision is made. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. That struck him as funny. Listen, Miss Patterson, he began, but she must have pressed a button because suddenly 300 pounds of muscle was in the room with him. Xavier, please escort Mr. Waxman to his desk to collect his things. Best of luck, Mr. Waxman. Perhaps this will encourage you to try harder at your next job. X looked embarrassed, but had to do his job. Dave grinned at him. Come on, X, like she said, let's not make this harder than it has to be. She was still talking as Dave walked out the door. Everyone avoided looking at him, which told him they probably knew beforehand. That didn't help his mood. He walked slowly, making eye contact with those who glanced his way. They looked away every time, and the women blushed. He had very few personal items, so it took less than 15 minutes to pack a small box. As he was leaving, X spoke. You forgot this, Mr. Waxman, he said, handing Dave the pen and pencil set she had given him when he made Salesman of the Year. Dave looked at it for a second and dropped it in the wastebasket with her picture. No, I didn't. X drove Dave home to take the company car back. After several attempts at conversation, X got the hint and stayed quiet. As Dave got out, X reached over to shake his hand. Dave took it because it was just his job and he liked the guy. Sorry, man. Sorry it happened like that. Dave grinned, though he didn't feel like it. Me too. He walked in, looking at the house as if seeing it for the first time. He realized there was very little of his presence in the house. It seemed she was minimizing him at home as well as at work. He wondered if he had a performance issue at home and if he could be fired for not keeping his numbers up. She came in around 7, late even for her. Dave was watching a baseball game and didn't look up. Hi, honey. Sorry I'm late. Meetings ran over. You know how the board loves to talk? He didn't respond, just kept watching the game. She looked at him for a minute and then tried a different approach. What's for dinner? They had a deal that whoever got home first made dinner. He realized she hadn't cooked more than a dozen times in the last year, mostly because he was traveling. Whatever you decide to fix yourself. I've already eaten. She stared for a minute, then started the worst fight of their marriage. Surely you're not mad about today. It was a business decision, honey. It had nothing to do with you personally. I still love you just as much. For an executive and a fairly intelligent person, you're a moron. And yes, I am mad. I'm beyond mad. You handled the whole thing very badly. Had I ever gotten a bad review in all the time I worked there? Where's the paper trail of warnings, counseling, and reprimands? Sure, my numbers were down, but you never bothered to find out why. I stopped begging. I'm sure I did the right thing professionally, she said. That shocked him into silence for a moment. She smiled and started to speak, but he exploded. Screw you, the board, and every other jerk in the company. You were not professional. You were not reasonable. And you damn sure weren't interested in anything I had to say. How much input did Adler have in this? She was reeling from his outburst and stuttered before she managed to speak. He'd been worried for months and was very nervous when he brought me the numbers. You had gone from being one of our top performers to the absolute worst. I had no choice. I had to show that no matter who you were, if you didn't perform, you were out. It was the only way to keep the respect of the team. Again, a stupid decision. I've been thinking all afternoon now that I had some free time. When did you stop respecting me as a man and an employee? If you had any love for me personally or regard professionally, you would have handled this differently. You could have talked to me, given me a heads up. If it got bad, you could have offered me a chance to resign. Do you know how hard it's going to be for me to find another job? If I can't perform well enough for my wife, someone who is supposed to love me, why would strangers trust me to do a good job? You ruined my chances in this town. It will be very hard for me to find a job now. It's not like I can show a glowing review from my old company, right? I've said enough. If we continue, I might say things that can't be taken back. Why don't you get some dinner while I finish watching the game? She tried one more time. I never thought you'd take it so badly. It's just business, honey. We'll be fine. And don't worry about a job. I make more than enough to support us. Dave held up his hand. Please stop while you're ahead. I bet you'd love to turn me into a house husband. It would cement your reputation as a tough CEO. I can hear them now. Watch out for her. She's so tough she fired her husband and turned him into a house husband. But she's the one on top in the relationship. If she isn't bossing him around, she makes him wear panties around the house. Well, you can forget that. I'll find another job somewhere, even if it's not here. Now please stop talking. He'd finally made her angry. Fine. Sulk. Get angry. It might motivate you to do a good job next time. By the way, your tantrum ruined the extra good loving I planned to give you tonight. Looks like it'll be you and your hand if you want any release soon. He shrugged. Fine. At least my hand won't fire me if I don't perform. That one hit her hard. She tried to speak, but finally screamed in frustration and stomped out of the room. He heard her rattling pans in the kitchen, so he assumed she made dinner. A little while later, he heard her go upstairs. She came back down in an old t-shirt and sweatpants, upset that he didn't comment. They sat in silence. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry, I wrestled with it a long time before I made the decision. I do love you. And it isn't the end of the world. We can stop talking about it. What's done is done. I'm going to bed. I need to get up early and put out some feelers to see if I can salvage anything from this mess you created. Good night. She floundered for something to say before settling on, I'll be up in a little while. He was already asleep when she woke him with her scream. Since when she changed, she never noticed that his things were gone. He was in the largest guest room with an attached bath and planned to stay there. Soon she was knocking on the door, demanding that he let her in. Dave just turned over, wondering how mad she'd be when she realized he changed the lock on the door and she didn't have a key. 10 minutes later, he heard the lock rattle. A few minutes after that, he heard a sigh and then went to sleep. Jen brought her boss her standard coffee and pastry the next morning, as well as her own. She had been with her since her first promotion as a secretary and later personal assistant. Jen loved Beth for how she treated her and was the one person in the company who could tell her the truth without worry of repercussions. Jen pulled a chair next to the desk, and they went through their morning routine of coffee and personal time. How did it go when you got home? Her boss sighed. Not good. Not good at all. He said more swear words in 2 hours than I've heard from him in all the years we've been together. Apparently, when he's angry, the truth comes out and he thinks very little of my management skills. He even moved out of the bedroom and changed the lock on the one he moved into. Did I tell you he threw the pen set he kept on his desk in the trash along with my picture? Really? Why is he taking it so hard? Jen looked at her boss with sad eyes. I warned you. You should have left him some dignity. The way you did it was really cold, boss. I had to do it that way. I was sending a message to everyone. No one is safe if you're not meeting the standards. How did the team react? Truthfully, Bev, it's mixed. Most of the men and some women think you're a strict boss. A few admire you, but they are very few. Many are updating their resumes saying they don't want to work for a company that fires people without warning. 2 of your salesmen say they see the writing on the wall. One already has an interview lined up and might be gone in 2 weeks. The other is thinking about moving to be closer to his aging parents and says this is the push he needed. Beverly couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't what she had planned. She thought that if she showed them, no matter who it was, she meant business. Everyone would work harder. She didn't expect to cause an exodus. This could be very bad. Very, very bad. She knew that in a couple of years she would be in line for a board seat, maybe even chairman. This might slow those plans down considerably. Jim brought her back to reality. "What are you going to do about your husband?" She waved her hands dismissively, still thinking about her job. "Give him a little time and space, I guess. He really does love me. He'll come around." Jen thought it would take more than that, but kept quiet. She had been loyal to Beverly all these years, but if things got bad, if people started leaving, she needed an exit plan. She had her own family to worry about. Dave spent the next 3 weeks being very unproductive. He stopped going to the gym, stopped eating right, and was drunk more often than not. He did nothing around the house, leaving a mess wherever he wanted. Bev tried being supportive at first, but then his harsh remarks made her fall silent. He noticed she spent a lot more time at work, where she felt more comfortable as the boss. He then went through a phase of not bathing. After 3 days, Beth finally had enough. "For God's sake, Dave, man up, you stink, and you're getting a potbelly. You might like living like a pig, but I don't. I'm sorry, all right? I could have handled it better, but as you said, I can't undo it." Her face softened. "Please, honey, I miss the old you. I miss you in our bed, and I miss you with me. It's been almost a month. Why won't you come back to me?" Dave held up his fingers and wiggled them. "I'm kind of busy now. They seem to love me and never complain about my performance or threaten to fire me. Besides, you're already in a committed relationship." She went pale, then red with anger. "I have never cheated on you. Not once in all the time we've been married. Though I admit, once word got out we weren't getting along, I've had offers. We'll get back to that in a minute. You've cheated on me our whole marriage, not with a man, but with your job. It always comes first. You always put it above any needs I have. Do you know how many anniversaries we've missed celebrating together? 8 out of 13 years. Something at work was always more important than spending time with the man you supposedly love above all others. Don't get me started on missed birthdays and the times you broke commitments with both our parents and friends. Have you noticed how rarely you see your parents now? Or how many old friends we haven't socialized with in years? You just never seem to have the time. I'm glad now we never had children. They'd feel like they were in a single-parent home because they'd never see you. As for your offers, how many have come from people higher in the company? I can't imagine you having an affair with someone lower down. It would have to be someone who could help your career." He felt bad for her for a second, seeing the pained look on her face, but quickly got over it when she slapped him hard. It was the first time either had touched the other in anger. He looked in the mirror about 30 minutes later and the handprint was still on his cheek. "You son of a bitch. Don't you know I'm doing all this for us so we can retire while we're still young enough to enjoy it? So I'm not Miss Congeniality, and I apologized every time I missed an anniversary or major event in our lives, and we agreed on no children. I couldn't afford the distraction, so don't throw that at me. As for the offers, yes, some were from people who could help my career, but I would never have an affair because I still love you and could never betray you like that. You need to get yourself together, so get showered, dressed, shaved, and let the woman who loves you take you out for dinner." She stopped, out of breath from emotion and the long speech. He gave her a sad smile. "Sorry. I've already had dinner, 3 burritos and a large fry. About kids, I didn't want to end my family line. I loved you so much that I agreed, but it still hurt. When my clients showed pictures of their families, what could I show them? We don't even have a dog. You're right, though. The pity party has to stop. I'm going upstairs to shower, shave, and try to be a real person again. I'll hit the gym 3 times a day for a while. What else do I have to do? Thanks for the motivational speech." She stood there in shock from his words and the fact that she had hit him. Dev was smart enough not to follow him, but when he came downstairs, she was very apologetic. "I'm sorry, but you don't know how hard this is on me. One business decision shouldn't ruin a good marriage like this, please. I'm sorry I had to fire you, but it was in the company's best interest. Like I've told you many times, it was just business. It doesn't mean I love you any less." He sighed. Look, Bev, I know you think you did the right thing. Firing me was just the final straw. I've played second fiddle to your career our whole marriage, and frankly, I'm done. I hope the board chair can keep you warm at night, and that the raises and accolades make up for the loss of grandchildren to dote on. I hope your success fills the void of a life without family or close friends. He paused. Is it hard on you because you regret how you handled things and hurt me? Or is it hard because people are leaving? You created a hostile work environment. People don't respect you anymore. They fear you, afraid you'll fire them at any time. That can't be good for productivity. Don't look so shocked. I had friends there, and every time I see one, they tell me what's going on. And before you ask, I never badmouth you. I just say you were sure of your actions at the time. I'm curious how you'll handle it when the numbers drop and the chairman comes around. Better hire a good spin doctor if you don't have one. Dave sighed quietly. Bev, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you now. This is going to get a lot worse. Be prepared for what's coming in the next few weeks. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some serious gym time to make up for. Beverly lay in bed, feeling sorry for herself, going over the conversation. It hit her that he said, I loved you so much. She wondered if he still loved her as she finally drifted off into a restless sleep. 3 days later, Beverly found herself sitting with Jen, pouring her heart out. I just don't know what to do anymore. Everything I say or try, he turns against me. I'm beginning to understand he's carried these resentments for years but held them in. He hasn't touched me in almost 8 weeks. I had to buy a vibrator to cope or I'd be climbing the walls. I can't believe he turned down the job opportunity I arranged for him. He came here while you were running an errand for me and exploded. I'm glad it was lunchtime and most everyone was out of the office or in the break room. Why did he get so angry when you were just trying to help him? Jen asked. I had to promise the president there I'd give him some of our business if he helped me out. Things were going well until the final meeting and the guy laid it out. He said he was only hiring Dave as a favor to me after I made some concessions. He told Dave he was giving him the worst territory, and if he didn't bring the numbers up quickly, he wouldn't make it past the probation period. Just because your wife carried you all those years, he told him he wouldn't be as understanding. What did Dave do? Jen asked. He stood up, thanked the man for the interview, then left. He came straight here. The president called me just after he left and was furious. He demanded that I keep my commitment to him. They changed the subject to general business when the receptionist called. A gentleman is here to see Beth, but he doesn't have an appointment. He says he only needs 5 minutes. He says he has something to deliver. Curious, Bev had him escorted to her office. He was a large man with a friendly face, dressed impeccably in a nice suit and tie. He thanked her for her time and got down to business. Miss Beverly Patterson, or should I address you as Mrs. David Waxman? I go by my maiden name here for professional reasons. What can I do for you today? He looked apologetic as he handed her the papers. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you've been served. Good day. I'll find my own way out. Dave looked at the large envelope and fainted. When she came to, she was on her sofa. Jen was wiping her face with a cold cloth. What happened? You fainted. I fainted? Why would I faint? Jen held up the envelope, and it all came back. Dave started crying uncontrollably. It took her 20 minutes to calm down. In a trembling voice, she asked Jen to open it and tell her how bad it was. Jen opened it and nearly fainted herself. She read through the papers with intense concentration before placing them gently on the table. The good news, Beverly, is that he's not filing for divorce. Dave started to smile, but Jen held up her hand. He's doing something worse. He's suing the company, you, Bob Adler, and the chairman for wrongful termination and mental cruelty. You need to talk him out of this fast, Beverly, or your career is over. It doesn't matter if he wins or loses, the bad publicity will be enormous. Even if you keep your job, you'll never rise any higher. Beverly nearly fainted again, but pulled herself together and drove home as fast as she could. All she found was a note on the dining room table. I'm sorry, Miss Patterson, but you crossed the line. My lawyer says it's pretty much a slam dunk, and your board will do anything to keep it quiet. She was angry when I told her I would accept no deals and intended to make this as public as possible. Don't look for me. On her advice, I've moved out, at least temporarily. I still love you, though I don't understand why. When this is over, I'm willing to go to counseling if you are. Maybe we can find our way back to each other. Maybe not. But I want to try. Oh, and I got a job. Something new, and I'm looking forward to it. We'll talk soon. Beverly leaned back in the kitchen chair, watching her life and career fall apart. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, they did. 2 weeks had passed, and the hearing was in 4 days. The board had sent an independent expert and a lawyer, and it didn't look good. The discussions with employees did not paint her as a good boss. She was staring into space when Bob Adler burst into the room. She had always liked Bob and had recruited him. He had done a great job until now. After she fired Dave, Bob had flirted with her, and she leaned on him to cope with the pain. She was lonely and depressed, so she accepted his offer to have dinner to forget her problems. They drank too much wine, and when he kissed her, it felt good. But then she pushed him away. He apologized, and Beverly stopped any non-professional contact, though he begged her to give it a chance. God damn it, Bev, you need to do something about this. Solomon Enterprises just called and decided not to sign the contract. There goes 18% of our business. They said they found a cheaper, more reliable source whose quality matches or exceeds ours. They said we could bid next year, but it better be something spectacular if this new supplier works out. If that's not enough, Apex and Stewart Industries are hinting they may go to someone else. That's another 8%. That was the last thing Beverly wanted to hear. If they lost a quarter of their business while tied up in the wrongful termination case, she was finished, along with Adler and maybe a few others. She needed to act quickly. She sent Bob out, especially when he started pestering her for another date, saying it would be okay now that she was separated. Bev wasn't sure she had a marriage left, but dating Bob would surely end it if Dave found out. She reached for the phone. "Hello, Mr. Solomon. Thank you for taking my call." "You're welcome, Beverly. And how many times have I asked you to call me Sal? I'd like to think we are friends." "We are, Sal. Tell Susan hello for me, and I hear your daughter just got her MBA from Wharton. Is she the future of Solomon Enterprises?" He laughed. "I hope so. She's already smarter than I ever was. In 3 years, Susan and I plan to sail away into the sunset." "That sounds lovely, Sal. I'm guessing you know why I'm calling." "Yes, I'm sorry, Beverly. The new supplier is cheaper, faster, and exceeds our quality standards. The difference is significant enough that I can't walk away from it." "Have you signed the contract yet?" "Not yet, but we're scheduled to finish up the paperwork in 2 weeks." "Good. Please, Sal, give me a chance to match or beat their deal. Just one meeting, that's all I ask." He sighed. "All right. For old time's sake, I'll give you one shot. Set it up and I'll be there." Beverly was confident she could win the business back. She stopped worrying about that and focused on the upcoming hearing. Dave was feeling lost and was about to lose his mind. It looked like he had little hope of finding anything in his line of work unless he expanded the search area, which meant moving. He was at the gym, working out hard, wondering if he had a marriage left. Yes, he had coasted the last year, but Beverly never allowed him to explain his reasons. She didn't know he had deliberately let orders dwindle, and his core customers were fine with it. By chance, after he left the gym, he ran into Sal Solomon and his wife, Susan. Sal had been one of Dave's first customers. They went back 8 years and became like family. Dave once told Susan she was the smart one, and he wished he had met someone like her when he was younger. That cemented their relationship, and Dave introduced her to others as his favorite aunt. Susan would giggle, and Sal would grin. "Sal, Susan, what a surprise. It's so good to see you. Are you in town on business?" "All pleasure," Susan replied. "We just got out of the theater. I've always wanted to see The Odd Couple, and this is the best touring version of the revival. When we found out they'd be here, we just had to come." Sal smiled. He once told Dave that his real job was to make his wife happy, and his business was just a means to that end. He never forgot a birthday or anniversary, and most of his employees benefited from it because he gave them a half-day off on their wedding anniversaries and the whole day off afterward to recover, with pay. Turnover in his office and factories was the lowest in the state. Someone had to die or move away before there was an opening. Every woman got roses and chocolates on her birthday, and every man got something related to his hobbies, be it golf balls, a fishing reel, or fine cigars. Executives came to observe his operation, and while many changed nothing, a few copied him. They insisted Dave join them, and for 90 minutes he forgot his problems and admired what a true relationship looked like. Eventually, they brought up Dave's situation. Susan was baffled, and Sal was a little angry. "You were one of her best. I really don't understand it. Did she not get your reasoning? She never gave me a chance to explain. She just called me into her office and fired me in the most public way possible. It's poisoned the well locally. It looks like I'll be moving soon." Susan spoke up. "Does Beverly know you're considering this? Is she willing to go with you?" "No, she doesn't know yet, and she would never leave her lover." Susan, looking confused, asked, "Lover? I have to believe she's never cheated on me, at least physically. No, her lover is her job. Like a skilled seducer, it offered her things I could never compete with." Sal was quiet for a minute, then grinned. "Since you're at loose ends, my boy, pop by and see me in the next couple of days. I may be able to help you out." With nothing else to do, Dave went to Sal's office 3 days later. They talked general business for a few minutes when Sal asked an innocent-sounding question. "Ever hear of Rap Group?" Dave had indeed heard of them, a new company out of South Korea trying to break into the U.S. market. He met the youngest son of the owner in an airport while waiting for a delayed flight. They found out what each other did, and he showed Dave some of his products on his laptop. Dave realized they would be in direct competition with his company. Luckily for his business, they were concentrating on the West Coast, far from his area. The guy was likable, though. His father had sent him to the U.S. to learn the ways of American business. They ended up in the same towns a lot, so Dave took him under his wing. Dave lost contact with him when he was sent to the Midwest, basing him in Chicago. Dave sighed in relief. Their products were high quality, and their prices were almost 30% less than what Beverly and Dave represented. Dave knew Sal hadn't asked the question casually and grinned. "Yeah, I know of them. I'm friends with the youngest son of the owner, but I haven't talked to him in over a year." Sal looked a bit embarrassed. "They're expanding into our area. I talked to a few people who've used their product, and they all seem satisfied. I haven't responded to them mostly because of you. Your stuff is higher priced, but you always kept your word, always delivered on time and followed up if there was a problem. Stewart and a few others took your advice when you demonstrated the latest version, and we've been retooling for the better part of the year using up old inventory. I have about a month's supply left before I'll be completely changed over. We find ourselves in a unique position. Rap's version fits even better into our plans than your old company's version does. The main reason I wanted you to come by was to ask your advice and offer you a job. Instead of selling, why don't you try buying? My purchasing manager is retiring, and we haven't found anyone who fits. With your experience and sales skills, vendors would have a hard time trying to take advantage. You know all the tricks, right? Besides, most vendors either know you or know your reputation, so it'll cut down on a lot of haggling. What were you making before you got fired? And I mean your best year." Stunned, Dave told him. "Not a problem there. In fact, I can probably go 5 or 10 grand better and work in performance and savings bonuses. Why don't you give it a try? Even if it doesn't work out or you decide it's not for you, it'll look good on your resume to show you've worked on both sides of the business." In the end, Dave decided to give it a try. It beat moving out of state, and he was a little excited about it for the first time since he got fired. He went home to his apartment, actually happy to be there. His former house was really her house, a monument to her success. She'd often remind him that if their salaries had been equal, they could never have afforded it. Dave thought a bit about the upcoming hearing and sighed. He wondered how much of what he was doing was seeking justice and how much was revenge. Probably half and half. He knew if he won, Beverly's career was over. Even if she kept her job, it was as far as she would ever go in the company. If he lost, it would still take years to recover from the damage. Would he be happy if he was vindicated? Probably. Would he be happy about hurting her career? Honestly, he thought he would, just a bit. Not because of who they were, but because she needed a lesson in how to treat people, and a reminder that the world didn't revolve around her. Thinking back to when they first got together, he remembered a fresh-faced young woman who had set goals as strong as her abilities. He remembered taking her out to dinner to celebrate her first promotion at a place they normally couldn't afford. When she objected, Dave showed her his first bonus check, telling her she wasn't the only one in the company rewarded for hard work. As fresh as it was yesterday, he remembered the love-making celebration of two young people desperately in love and on top of the world. He also remembered afterward as they lay exhausted, her head on his chest, her hand rubbing his stomach as he toyed with her hair, thinking things were just going to get better. To make a long story short, they didn't get better. Each promotion sent her a little farther away from him. Her clothes got more expensive, her makeup and hair done by top professionals. She got angry if he tried to kiss her before going to one function or another, always with her as the center of attention. He remembered standing around, mostly ignored, feeling useless. Finally, he stopped going except for really important events. Beverly was mad at first, saying it sent the wrong message before spinning it to look like it was her idea. He nearly tore her head off when he heard she told people he didn't go because he was embarrassed he couldn't keep up with the conversations. He made a point to go to every function for a while, seeking out important people, especially her clients, and having long conversations about things she never knew he even remotely understood. It got to the point where she asked him to tone it down so the focus could be on her. Well, today was the day, Beverly thought as she walked towards the conference room at the local state employment office. Her career would either be over or not, depending on the outcome of the negotiation. She hadn't seen her husband in almost 3 weeks and was surprised at his appearance. He'd lost most of his spare tire, let his hair grow out a little, and was sporting a closely trimmed beard. It made him look distinguished and young at the same time, if that was possible. There was what could only be described as a blonde bombshell sitting beside him. But Bev knew looks could be deceiving. This was Amanda Austin, one of the most experienced and feared labor lawyers in the state. She was there mostly as an observer, gathering data for the lawsuit she knew was coming. Beverly had the best counterpart my company had to offer with her. He had spent some time coaching her on how to answer the inevitable questions and how to project confusion about how this had happened, while insisting she was just doing what was best for the company. She asked him how he thought they would do. This case is a disaster waiting to happen. There's no paper trail, no write-ups, no warnings, no explanation of the consequences if he didn't improve. His last review was very complimentary. By company policy, his manager should have handled the termination with someone from HR as a witness. He was entitled to an appeal to the next person up the chain. Since you fired him and didn't give him a chance to appeal, you breached company policy. You know, I read your file before I came down. You got really good reviews. The home office and the board spoke highly of you, yet here you are making a mistake even a newbie would avoid. I'll do my best, but if he wants to make it ugly, we can't stop him. Have you talked to him lately? Does he know the negative impact this could have on your future? Beverly had to admit she hadn't, which made his frown deeper. And he probably knows exactly what would happen to you if it gets bad. Everyone sat down, and the arbitrator started the meeting. She had a video camera set up to record everything. She introduced herself as an arbitrator from the State Employment Commission and explained that while they might reach an agreement, it wouldn't be binding until everything was written down and notarized. She also explained that if an agreement couldn't be reached, or if either party disagreed with her decision, they could take it to the Capitol, or if that failed, to court. First, she thanked the HR representative for sending her a copy of the company termination policy so she could familiarize herself with our procedures before letting anyone else speak. She asked a few questions. Mr. Waxman, Miss Patterson, I understand you are married. True? Beverly said yes as positively as she could, and Dave just nodded. Tell me, Miss Patterson, how has this impacted your marriage? Do you consider what your husband is doing reasonable? I'd like to clear this up before it gets to the civil stage. They didn't speak up, so Beverly went first. We are most definitely married and will remain so. Yes, it has absolutely impacted our marriage. He's moved out, hasn't talked to me since he did, and now we're here. I must have told him 100 times what I did was just business and it shouldn't impact our private lives. I really don't understand why he's doing this. The arbitrator thought the woman was delusional. How could it not impact their marriage? She had told him he had no value to the company, terminated him after 9 years, sent him home, and couldn't understand why he was angry. She turned to the husband. Mr. Waxman, care to comment? Ma'am, on the advice of my lawyer, I am not here to discuss my domestic situation. This meeting is solely to determine if my wrongful termination complaint has merit. Fair enough. Miss Patterson, please tell me exactly what occurred the day you terminated Mr. Waxman and state your reasons for letting him go. Beverly explained how his supervisor, Bob Adler, had come to her to discuss Dave's poor sales record over the past year. She said she had no idea his numbers had gotten so bad, and after discussing it in depth with his manager, they agreed he should be let go. She also said it was the hardest business decision she had ever made, but she had to put the company's interests first. The arbitrator asked for documentation and frowned when none could be produced. Tell me, Miss Patterson, if this employee had a very good record for 8 years and then his sales plummeted, wouldn't you have been curious and tried to determine why? If he had been a good employee for so long, surely he deserved a chance to turn his sales around. A probationary period, explained in detail in writing, stating what failure to improve would result in, and monthly monitoring to ensure he was going in the right direction. The reason I ask is that very scenario is described in the company manual your HR department sent me for employees with at least 5 years of tenure. Beverly squirmed and gave her coached answer. That is correct. But as CEO, I have the authority to terminate anyone at will. The numbers had dropped so radically I thought we were in danger of losing some very old and lucrative accounts. In fact, that is exactly what is happening. I felt I had no choice. The arbitrator nodded, then turned to Dave. Sir, does this sound reasonable? Dave actually grinned. Not at all. There was a reason the numbers were low. I even tried to explain it to Miss Patterson a few times at work and at home, but she told me to stay out of things above my pay grade. So I dropped it. Tell me then, why did your numbers drop so dramatically? Believe it or not, it was planned. We were coming out with a new and improved product, and there was a lot of old inventory still available. I talked the customers into buying the new product by discounting the old stock and clearing it out of inventory. I have statements from 4 of our customers supporting this. As soon as the old inventory reached a certain level, they were going to order the new product in bulk. It was a win-win for everyone. They got the old inventory at a discount, which would be more than made up for when they ordered the new product. So yes, I took it easy a bit, played golf, and had dinners with clients while discussing future orders. I never forgot I had the company's best interests at heart. My immediate supervisor knew all this. Why isn't he here? I asked specifically for him. This isn't a court, Mr. Waxman. I can't force someone to appear at an informal hearing. Do you have any proof of your claims? Amanda Austin reached into her briefcase and handed some paperwork to the arbitrator. She read through a few documents, frowning. The corporate lawyer tried to stop her, but she reminded him this wasn't a courtroom. He settled by demanding to see them after she was done. As she handed him each document, his frown deepened. They argued until the arbitrator put a stop to it. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. I've seen and heard enough. Miss Patterson, you violated company guidelines when you terminated him. To put it legally, you denied him due process. My finding is that Mr. Waxman was let go without cause and without following company policy. Therefore, I'm ordering you to give him his position back with no recriminations and pay his salary from the time he was separated from the company until now. Either of you may appeal this decision, but you will have to travel to the Capitol and it will be considered a legal proceeding. Does anyone object at this time? Beverly, her head down in despair, shook her head. No. Dave spoke up. I'll accept the back pay, ma'am, and thank you. But I will not return to the company because I feel it would be a toxic environment. Besides, I have a new job that I'm really enjoying. Beverly realized her career was over and she would be lucky if they let her stay with the company. Her lawyer and Dave's had a few words afterward, and he was still not smiling when he returned. Back at the office, they went into a conference room, and he spelled it out. The hearing went pretty much as I expected. You need to make sure he gets that check as soon as possible. Amanda told me they were suing us, naming you, Adler, and the company in the suit. I told her to set a time for us to meet and settle. Apparently, your husband doesn't want to settle. He wants to take it to court and make it a public record. That means anyone can look it up. How many talented people do you think would look at that and not send us resumes? I don't know how to proceed. Normally, we'd throw a little money at him and it would just go away. That won't work here because it's not about the money. You need to talk to your husband and get him to let us work something out. I would do that very thing, sir, if I knew how to get in touch with him. He's left me, changed his number, and disappeared. None of our mutual friends have heard from him or seen him. When he said he had a new job, it was news to me. This is a small market, and I would have heard if he was selling for someone else. I'll try a few of his friends and tell them it's urgent, but I don't know if they'll help." He left, saying he would return as soon as he got the paperwork. Jen took Beverly out to lunch to cheer her up. It didn't really work. Jen, clever as she was, distracted Beverly by talking about the upcoming visit to Solomon Industries. "The old man has always liked you, Bev. Turn on the charm and get him back into the fold. Free advice here. While he likes you, he doesn't care much for Adler. I couldn't tell you why, but it's well known that if Dave wasn't running interference, Adler would have angered him enough to make him leave already." Beverly's head was spinning. She asked herself why she didn't know this as CEO. A small voice started to tell Beverly that she should have paid more attention to Dave when he talked about his job. She finally admitted this to herself after half a bottle of scotch. She realized she had been minimizing his position for quite a while and struggled to understand why. Dave had destroyed the woman he was supposed to love and support. She would be extremely lucky if she got to keep her job or even stay with her company. Did he feel good about it? Not really. He knew how much she loved that job and loved handing out her business card with CEO on it. He did, however, feel vindicated. She had brought this on herself. It was worse than what she would have done to just any employee, but it was only a matter of time before her arrogance and egotism drove her to do something equally stupid to someone else. Maybe she would mark it up to hard experience and learn from it. Now that part of their lives was over, Dave wondered if they had any chance to get over it and remain a couple. He knew he would never return to the old relationship. It would be a full partnership or nothing. He was sure he was never going to live in that monstrosity she called a home. It was nothing more than a monument to her success. Sad, really. It would have made a great home to raise children. One thing he had to look forward to was the money. The back pay, almost 5 months' worth, was a nice chunk of change. Amanda was urging him to settle instead of dragging it out in court, reminding him that the best revenge was living well. They had sued the company for $2 million, and she said they would probably offer 20% just to keep it out of the papers. She found out they were merging with a competitor, and this incident would severely impact their worth going forward. Firing Beverly wouldn't help much now, but it might save them some face. Dave liked the new town. It was half the size of the city he left, and the pace was more relaxed. The people were friendlier, and he couldn't ask for a better place to work. Best of all, the housing market was a little depressed, so it was possible to buy a lot more house for a lot less money than back home. He grinned and shrugged at the thought. What did back home even mean anymore? He wasn't sure. Dave had his eye on a place that had been for sale for almost a year. A larger, older 2-story house on 6 acres of land. He didn't need that much land, but it would be fun to own. The owners were anxious to sell, and he had a feeling he could get a good deal. He researched it online, and it seemed solid, with no major problems other than the roof. It was still good, but was 20 years old. He decided if he bought it, he would replace the shingles with tin. It was all the rage, and he had fond memories of staying with his grandparents on their farm in the summer, falling asleep to the sound of rain on the roof. That night, Dave had a rare dream. Likely he dreamed all the time, but he hardly ever remembered them. This dream had him sitting on the front porch of the house beside a woman. Both of them were on a glider, rocking gently while they watched 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, run around the yard playing with a ball. 2 dogs, one big and one small, chased them. A large calico cat sat on the railing looking on. He turned to kiss his companion, only to discover she had no face. He awoke with a start and lay there trying to figure out what it meant. Sighing, he got up, deciding to hit the gym on the way to work. It was going to be a busy day. Beverly didn't sleep well that night, and as she got ready for work, she noticed the bags under her eyes. She hoped it was just stress, but if they were permanent, well, she knew a good doctor. In her world, if you wanted to stay ahead, you had to look like you were 25 with 15 years of experience. In a way, she was looking forward to what was coming. The lawyer did a little research on Bob and came to her with disturbing news. It seemed he was negotiating with the company they were merging with to take over her job when the contracts were signed. Corporate's directives were clear: remove the problem immediately. This time, however, Beverly had all her ducks in a row. Jack, their lawyer, and Angela, a woman flown down from corporate, would be with her to make sure there were no mistakes. It rankled Beverly a little to have them there. She was perfectly capable of handling it on her own, but recent experience taught her that this could be a good thing. Bob was surprised to find he wasn't going with her to see Sal. By then, she had no reason to sugarcoat the reason. "Sal despises you, Bob. I'm trying to get back in his good graces, and bringing you along would ruin that." He seemed surprised, then got angry. "Screw that old fart, babe. His business isn't that important to us. Do I need to remind you to stay professional? I was never your babe. If you think losing 18% of our sales base means so little, maybe you're not as suited to your job as I thought. You were pretty upset when you heard the news. Think about that while I'm gone. And remember, we need to meet after I get back, so keep your schedule open." She enjoyed the look on his face as she left and couldn't wait to see it when they lowered the boom on him that afternoon. As she drove, she focused on her presentation to Sal and his new purchasing manager. It had to be perfect if she wanted any chance. Sal was waiting at the restaurant, even though Bev was 15 minutes early. He stood and seated her, and she appreciated it. Dave had always been well-mannered, taught by a great uncle who believed manners never went out of style. She missed that, among other things. They chatted for a minute, but when she started talking business, he stopped her. "Please, Beverly, let's wait for my purchasing director. I want his opinions and insights on everything. He should be here any minute. In fact, here he is now." Beverly turned to greet him, and the words died in her throat. "Dave?" He was the new purchasing director. If she wasn't already in trouble, she was now. He must have seen the despair in her eyes and spoke gently. "Hello, Beverly. You went all out. I think I've only seen you in that dress 3 times, each for an important event. I can see why you wore it. You always look spectacular in it." Beverly didn't know how to respond, so she changed the subject. "This is the job you talked about in arbitration? You're in purchasing now? For a salesman, that must be like going to the dark side." He grinned. "It is, kind of. But it's really just sales in reverse, if you know what I mean. It's worth it when I see salesmen realize who I am. It blows their plans completely. I've been there, done that, so there's not much they can surprise me with. It actually makes things easier. They know they can't fool me, so they just get down to negotiations. That being said, let's enjoy lunch and talk business later." It was surreal for Beverly, sitting there eating lunch with her husband, knowing he held all the power. She couldn't help but wonder if that was how he felt at times. After dessert, with cups of very good coffee in hand, she began her pitch. She talked about their long business relationship, how well they had responded to Sal's needs, and how they could continue to serve him with excellence in the future. Dave let Sal take the lead, for which she was grateful. Sal listened, but stopped her halfway through. "All you say is true, Beverly. But let's not forget who landed our business in the first place and served us so well over the years. I was buying that as well as the material. Now the situation has changed. Yes, I did have a verbal commitment with your salesman. Once he left the company, though, I no longer considered it binding. The South Koreans have a better product at a great price. It exceeds the specifications we have for your product. My purchasing agent knows the son of the owner and finds him trustworthy. Who are you going to replace Dave with? Adler? I don't think so. I've never liked him, and more importantly, I never trusted him. Even if we had stayed with you, I'd insist on another account rep." He stood, looking down on her. "I always liked you, Beverly, even if I didn't agree with everything you did. I'm still your friend if you let me, but professionally, we're pretty much done. I have another appointment, so I'm leaving. You can continue to press your case with my purchasing agent if you wish. Best of luck." He bent down and kissed her cheek. "He still loves you," he whispered, "but it's going to be a long road to get him to trust you again. Give it your best shot." Did Dave enjoy the lunch? Yes, on several levels. Did he enjoy her pain? Just a bit. It was satisfying to see her looking lost and confused, not the supremely confident person she usually was in her element. She looked at him sadly. "We don't have a chance, do we?" Are you talking professionally or personally? If it's business, then no, you don't. Their product is superior to yours in almost every way. It's cheaper and readily available. Even if I were still with the company, it would have only been a matter of time before we started losing customers. You need to get with corporate and rethink your business plan. Maybe you should go in the direction I suggested a year ago. Retool your assembly lines. Get R&D more involved. It's time to reinvent yourselves, or you'll be as extinct as the dinosaurs in a few years. Dave looked into her confused eyes and realized she didn't remember what he tried to tell her all those months ago. He wasn't a business genius, but he could read the writing on the wall. He didn't have power goggles on. Arrogance and egotism were their own rewards. They sat silently for a few minutes. "Dave," she said in a timid voice, "may I ask about us?" Dave almost laughed, but stopped himself. Instead, he asked her as gently as possible, "What? Us? You and me. Honey, please. You need to move back home so we can go back to what we had. I miss you very much." Dave got the impression that she was surprised by his reply. "What, us? There hasn't been an us for almost 3 years now. There was me, the ornament at dinners and parties, someone to come home to, but that's about it. I was just a minor supporting character in the movie of your life. Intimacy died between us years ago, Beverly, and I don't see it coming back. Before you say it, yes, we were intimate on rare occasions, but think about it. How many times did I initiate in the last 2 years? I'll give you a hint. Never. I felt like I was just there to give you release when you needed it. There was no foreplay to speak of and no snuggling after. As soon as you got off, you were ready to roll over and go to sleep, whether I had gotten anything out of it or not. Don't deny it. Think about it, and you'll see I'm right." He could see conflicting emotions on her face, but he continued. "As for coming home, well, I'll never go back to that house again, whether we stay together or not. It was never a home. It was a monument to your success, and you fought me tooth and nail whenever I wanted to make changes. In fact, I've already put a bid on a home I think I'll really like. It's an older 2-story, too much house for me, actually, but it has lots of room and a little acreage. Best of all, it already has a building that would be perfect for the workshop I've always wanted and room for the vegetable garden I've always dreamed of. I'm sorry, honey, but after 8 years of living in your shadow, I've learned to love the light." "Where does that leave us?" she asked, her voice sad and forlorn. "I couldn't tell you. I suspect we'll never be together as man and wife again. You have to respect your partner, and I haven't had that from you as a man or an employee for quite a while now. I'm not a supporting character anymore, Beverly. I want my own show. I realize now that it's at least partly my fault we ended up like this. But at the time, I loved you so much that if it made you happy, I learned to live with it. And the more I gave, the more you wanted until I had nothing left to give. I suspect deep down that that is the exact moment you realized you didn't need me anymore. You minimized my impact on your life to the point that I was invisible to you. Really, it shouldn't be that hard on you. Just carry on as you've been doing, and pretty soon I'll just be a dim memory." He stood, placing his hand on her shoulder. "Go back to the love of your life, Bev, your job. And free advice, stay away from Adler. The man's a snake. I don't know how he got into your head long enough to poison your mind against me, but step back and consider. What did he have to gain by turning you against me? Think about it. And don't worry too much. You've been too good for too long for this mistake to wound you fatally. You might lose a notch or two and have to do some major butt-kissing, but the company still knows your worth. Goodbye, Bev." He paused for just a second. "I'm sorry, but my company and yours have come to a parting of the ways. But really, it's just business, you know." She flinched, and he wondered if she caught his meaning. It was the exact phrase she had used to justify firing him. Beverly wanted to sit for a while and digest everything, so she went to a park she'd seen on the way into town. She parked, found a bench, and reviewed her life. Some of it filled her with immense satisfaction. She could remember every promotion, the hard work she had done to get it, and the immediate plans to move to the next level until finally she was at the top of her little food chain. Some of it filled her with unease. The anniversaries she'd missed, always promising to make it up, the birthdays, the special events in his life, her parents, his parents, and their friends' lives, all missed while she chased the next deal. She remembered seeing the fleeting look of pain in Dave's eyes when the toddler of one of their friends tottered up to him with upraised arms. He cuddled the child, and for a moment Bev had a vision. It was their child. She shook it off. Unless Dave agreed to be a full-time house husband, there would never be any children in their future. She'd seen many talented women get sidelined because they couldn't commit fully to their jobs due to family. Besides, she was 36, so that ship had probably already sailed. She sat straight up in shock at a realization. God, Dave was right. He would always be second in her priorities as long as she continued on the path she had committed to. It must have felt like she had another lover when he couldn't compete with her career. It hit her then. Getting him back would be a long and difficult road. She did want him back. Yes, she had minimized him to the point of no respect, but he was her rock, the one she always turned to for comfort and assurance. She wondered how she could undo the damage she'd done to his heart and ego. Could she learn to balance career and marriage enough to keep him satisfied and assured he was the most important thing to her? She knew it would be tough, but she was determined. Bev knew she could do anything if she set her mind to it. She watched the children play for a bit, a sad smile on her lips. After a few minutes, it turned into a real smile. The first step on her journey back would be to fire one of the snakes in her garden. She tried to muster up some sympathy for Bob, but found none. He'd betrayed her husband, her, and the company. She wasn't as dense as he thought, but she admitted she was vain enough to listen to him feed her ego. Now it was time for his sins to catch up with him. She called ahead and set the time. Their lawyer and the HR representative were ready. They had arrived while she was gone, and she knew that after dealing with Bob, there would be some tough choices to make and bad news to handle. So be it. She had weathered storms before, and today it wasn't as important to her as it had been in the past. Bob came in all smiles that immediately disappeared when he saw who was in the room. She didn't have to introduce Jack, but he had never seen Angela. Bev went straight to the point. Bob, this is Angela from corporate HR. She'll be auditing this meeting. We've received some disturbing news about your recent activities, and in the interest of fairness, we've decided to hear what you have to say about it. Jack stepped in. I don't know how you found out about the merger talks, but when you did, you apparently ran straight to their company and started a smear campaign against our CEO and our company, trying to secure her job for yourself. Don't act surprised. Their representatives came to us with their concerns, so we know the whole story. I'm sorry to say the negotiations are on hold while we clean up our in-house mess. They've made it clear that you have to go without a reference for the talks to continue. They've concluded that if you do this to us, what's to stop you from doing it to them? Bob went through several shades of red before he found his voice. So you found out? Let me guess. I'm to be terminated for cause. This time you have your ducks in a row. I know you'll walk me through the appeal process, but I'd be wasting my time. Your company was right to try to dump this dinosaur. If there isn't a major restructure completed in the next 3 years, there will be nothing left to spin off. He grinned at Beverly, which set her teeth on edge. You got too complacent, girl. I played you like a banjo, feeding that massive ego, undermining that loser of a husband, even if he was the best thing sales had going for them. I'm glad I never got around to screwing you. I bet you'd be next to worthless in the sack. You're too wrapped up in yourself to give pleasure to anyone else. Of course, I would have lied and told you how hot you were until it was time to get rid of you. Whatever. It doesn't matter now. I'll leave today and send word to payroll where to send my last check. May you live in interesting times, Bev. Beverly flamed red. Dave used to say that a lot, and she never knew what it meant until Bob had heard him once and explained it to her. It was a Chinese proverb, or maybe a curse. Interesting times meant unrest, revolution, famine, that sort of thing, while boring times meant everything was good. Bev kept a neutral look on her face when she answered him. Same to you, Mr. Adler, and I'd like to add another. Why? Because cheaters never prosper. Stop looking for the path of least resistance and try to earn something for once in your life. Goodbye. Jack and Beverly stood and started walking out. Bob, glowing with anger, started to speak, but Angela cut him off. The time for talk is over, Mr. Adler. You have some documents I need you to sign, and then you can get on with your life. Please do not make this difficult. The 2 large security guards that appeared just then made him think that might be a good idea. Dave bought the house, getting a really good deal. He immediately gave the roofing contractor the go-ahead, and 2 weeks later, The gray tin complemented the color of paint he had chosen for the exterior. While he was at it, he had the carpet pulled out and the original hardwood floors refinished. The house had a wraparound porch, and Dave installed ceiling fans over the rockers and the porch swing to help keep it cool in the summer while he enjoyed the sunsets. He could have afforded the house using his back pay and part of his savings as a down payment, but he would have still carried a 15-year mortgage. So he succumbed to his lawyer's pleas and took a settlement instead of going to court. It wasn't as much as they had hoped because, frankly, that division wasn't all that profitable anymore. He still got enough to buy the house outright, make the changes he wanted, and have some left over along with his severance pay and all his savings. That had been another bone of contention. Bev would never agree to a joint account, so they each had their own and deposited a set amount into a household fund. He knew that if they divorced, he would be entitled to half the value of the house because they never had a prenup. And since their earnings were so disparate, he could probably get maintenance for a few years. He grinned, thinking about how much that would have galled her. In the end, he decided to let her do the filing. After all, she determined everything else about their lives. So why should this be any different? He found that he was a natural in his new job. His years in sales benefited him greatly. Surprisingly, 75% of the salesmen he dealt with loved him. He didn't play games, expect gifts, or kickbacks. He stopped doing business with anyone who tried to bribe or hustle him into accepting an inferior product. In general, he expected an honest price and excellent service. Those who dealt honestly and gave him what he wanted got his business. The other 25% learned quickly that Dave didn't require expensive dinners, outings to strip clubs, or rounds of golf at exclusive resorts. Some understood and appreciated his approach. Others were so stuck in their ways they never learned, and they lost his business. Sal loved Dave. Their materials and service costs were 20% lower. Deadlines were rarely missed, and Dave took advantage of offers to have vendor technicians come in, observe, and make suggestions, about half of which they implemented. The line workers loved Dave because their job got easier and their production bonuses got larger. Susan insisted he come to dinner at least twice a month, and the conversation inevitably turned to his domestic situation. Sal wisely stayed out of it, but Susan would not be deterred. "When are you going to stop punishing the poor girl and take her back? She's suffered enough. She calls me, maybe once a week. We always have the same discussion. She wants to know how you're doing, if you're happy, and though you can hear the pain when she asks if you're dating. I tell her the truth, straight from your mouth. You refuse to see any woman socially until the day the ring comes off your finger." Dave tolerated it a few times before he got a little irritated. "Susan, I admire you a great deal. If there was a category called ideal wife in the dictionary, it would show your face. But let me ask you something. You had a pretty good career when you married Sal, and he told me you worked for 6 more years before you quit and became a full-time mother. Sal had to face many of the same pressures Beverly faces now, but did he ever shut you out, miss anniversaries or important dates? Did Sal ever put his business before you and your family? Did he minimize your contributions to the relationship?" Dave paused and waited. She finally admitted there had been maybe 3 times in their marriage when the job had to come first, but that Sal had felt so bad about it that he showered her and the children with affection for weeks afterward. "Well, I didn't have that experience. Her attitude was, 'Suck it up, big boy. This is more important.' I lost friends, relationships I'd had for years, all victims to her career. I'm just now getting used to having friends again, to being able to accept invitations for little get-togethers. Things that are simple and mundane to others but precious to me. They're not networking per se, just hanging out and enjoying the company. I've got a house I love, a place to enjoy my hobbies. I even got to plant a little garden, something I've wanted to do for years. Does that mean I don't miss her? No. I remember the little things before she became important." The spur-of-the-moment trips to sightsee, which was code for making love in a strange bed. The conversations about life we used to have years ago when we actually shared a vision. I remember all of that. But those memories are dim, and the ones fresh in my mind are of her egotism and arrogance. She was like a sports star that read her own press, believing every story. She wants me back. Why? Most importantly, Susan, if she wants me, why hasn't she come to me? She's still in queen mode, waiting for the errant knight to return. If she's not willing to put any effort into our almost dead marriage, what makes you think she wants it that bad? I haven't even received a phone call. It doesn't sound like she's all that heartbroken to me. In this case, Mohammed needs to come to the mountain now. I love you both dearly, and your husband is my boss. But this is the last conversation we're having about Beverly, if you'll excuse me. He hadn't ranted or raved, but said everything in a calm, reasoned manner, but the message was clear. Leave it alone. Sal looked thoughtful, and Susan was red with embarrassment. She rose as he was leaving and surprised him with a hug. I'm sorry, Dave. I won't push you anymore. But you're wrong. She misses you terribly. The truth is, she's afraid to talk to you. She doesn't really know what to say, and she's scared you'll bite her head off. I'm going to call her in a bit and tell her what you said, and you have my solemn word. This will be the last time I involve myself. She grinned and kissed his cheek. Besides, you're doing too well in your job for me to rock the boat. I estimate your contributions have shaved at least 3 years off our retirement plans. Carry on. It never occurred to Dave that Sal was thinking about retiring. He was just over 50, but his daughter was due to start work soon. Popular rumor had it that as soon as he felt comfortable with her at the helm, he was going to sail away into the sunset. Dave had a fleeting thought of working with another Beverly and wondered if he could handle it. Once again, Beverly went home to an empty house to eat takeout and pretend to watch television. She had escaped the axe, but it was a close call. The chairman and 2 board members flew down unannounced, scaring the whole office. She was almost faint when they called her into the conference room. She felt like a schoolgirl in front of the principal. Their expressionless stares didn't bolster her self-confidence. After almost a minute, the senior board member spoke. All right, Beverly, tell us what happened. And more importantly, tell us why. Don't whitewash it or you'll be out of here so fast your head will spin. We've always trusted you to be honest. It would be a shame if we were to start doubting you now. It took a few pauses and a couple of crying breaks, but she got it out. She had nothing to lose, so she told them the truth. She had let her ego get the best of her, relied on people who didn't have the company's best interests at heart, and got played like a foolish schoolgirl. They seemed relieved when it was over and sympathetic. How are things on the home front? Have you kissed and made up yet? This started another round of sniffles. The chairman got a box of tissues and set them in front of Beverly. She mumbled her thanks as she blew her nose. No, and I doubt we're going to. I haven't talked to my husband in weeks. He's living in a new town with a new job and a house he bought and has no intentions of leaving. I've always liked Dave, reflected the chairman. It seems out of character for him to ignore your gestures of reconciliation. Beverly flamed red and told them she hadn't contacted him because she was ashamed and didn't know what to say. The chairman sighed. Well, there you go then. We may as well accept your resignation now. 2 of the traits I admired most in you were your ability to analyze a problem and your tenacity in achieving your goals. Obviously, you don't want your husband back. And to be honest, someone who shows so much hesitation and indecision is not top management material. Am I in the times not that long ago where the hounds of hell couldn't keep you from accomplishing your goals? His words stung. Only the fact that he was right kept her from lashing out. He saw her face redden in the sudden thrust of her jaw and chuckled. There you are. I was beginning to think I'd lost you for good. Now listen closely. You're still on shaky ground here. Bill, Jack, and I are your only supporters right now, and we've gone out on a limb for you. Do not chop it off behind us. You still have your job, but don't look for a favorable review or a bonus this year. What you do have is a second chance, but hear us out before you sigh in relief. This division was headed for a crash, Beverly. We're aware of the South Koreans and their imminent threat. If we stay the course we're on now, we will be out of business in 3 years. It's one of the reasons we decided to sell this division while it was still at the top. Your little mistake brought that to a halt. Between the lawsuit and the betrayal of the person you trusted, we've lost our edge. The merger talks are history. What you need to do now is figure out a way to reinvent the division, come up with new products and services, and give it a viable future. I'm going to be blunt. Succeed, and you redeem yourself. Fail, and you're out. We're giving you a year. His voice softened. It's the best we could do, Beverly. I know you'll make us proud, even if you fail. We have faith in you. She was so overwhelmed that a simple handshake wouldn't do. She gave each of them a heartfelt hug, swearing she would give it everything she had. She hugged the chairman last. After the others had gone, he took her hands. "I'm going to give you some advice, Beverly, on something that has nothing to do with work. If you really want Dave back, you'll have to go to him. He'll never come to you because you've hurt his pride too badly. He holds the power now. He has a good job, good friends, and a bright future. You have to show him you want an equal partner, and you have to mean it. The first instance of backsliding, and it will be over. I really believe you forgot, but Dave is a pretty shrewd individual. He saw the writing on the wall for this division last year. We even had a brief talk about it the last time I was down, and he mentioned the South Korean company. He even had some ideas on how to make us more competitive. I was impressed enough to tell him to discuss it with you. I have a feeling that discussion never took place. If it had, perhaps we wouldn't be having this talk now. Call me if you need resources. If I think it's justified, I'll allocate them. Think about everything I said, business and personal, and make good decisions." She left the conference room and went back to her office. Jin was hovering, and Beverly told her it was not all bad news, but that she needed some time to marshal her thoughts. She also asked Jin not to let anyone disturb her for the rest of the day. She locked herself in and thought about the most important goal in her life. How could she get Dave to love her again? The start was simple. With the help of Susan, Beverly cyber-stalked him on Facebook and started a conversation. She knew he had bought an old car with some of his bonuses and was slowly restoring it in his new garage. He posted every step, describing in detail what he was doing. He put out an appeal for a front bumper cover, and she burned up the websites. Money was no object. If it got her back into his life, it would be worth every dime. The fates were with her because a man contacted her, showing the front end of the car. It was perfect, but the back was totally trashed thanks to a secret joyride by two of his great-nephews. When he found out how expensive it would be to restore, he pulled it out into a field and left it for 6 months. The interior was in excellent condition, and the front end gleamed like a new penny. Beverly bought it instantly, but not before bargaining him down by almost $1,000. She was a master of negotiation. Beverly planned her approach with precision, using Susan to help her. Dave was having a barbecue to show off his new gas grill and clay oven. It was mostly people from work, along with a few of his neighbors. Susan asked casually if she could bring a friend, and he readily agreed. "This better not blow up on us," she warned Beverly. "If he gets really mad, it will be incredibly awkward between him and Sal." "He has no idea who my friend is, and I told him you were meeting us at his house," Beverly said, promising faithfully that if it started going bad, she would leave immediately. Beverly finished her plans. She must have changed outfits a dozen times before she realized it was just a cookout and she should dress for comfort. She chose a really nice sundress in his favorite color, light blue. It stopped just above her knees, showing quite a bit of leg when she sat down. He had always loved her legs. She used very minimal makeup, just wanting to highlight her eyes. She wore her hair loose, surprised at how long it had grown. She wore no jewelry except her engagement ring, wedding band, and a small diamond necklace he had bought her the first year they were together. Beverly was shaking a bit when she pulled into his driveway. It was the first time she had seen the house, and she was surprised at how big it was. Why would an almost single, childless man need such a big house? It gave off an air of old-fashioned charm, from the graveled paths to the porch swing on the wraparound porch where several people were gathered. They looked at Beverly curiously as she walked to the door, wondering who she was. She was just about to knock when it swung open. There he was. His eyes widened with surprise. It had been 10 weeks since they had last seen each other. Before he could speak, she rushed out what she had planned to say. "Hello, Dave. Please don't be upset. Susan invited me and I really wanted to see you. If you don't want me here, I'll go, but please, can I stay?" He stood for a moment before grinning. "Come in, Beverly. I'd like to show you my house. And later, I think we need to talk. Don't you?" He reached out and she grasped his hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. He flinched but didn't pull back. He introduced her around and many seemed surprised to hear he was married. She glanced down and breathed a sigh of relief to see his wedding band still on his finger. Maybe there was hope for them yet. She finally let go, and Susan dragged her away to gossip. They whispered plans to each other, and Susan gave Beverly a hug with encouraging words. "You've got him a little off balance right now. Keep him that way. Don't give him time to think about the past. Keep him in the moment and his eyes on you. Be as affectionate as he will allow. But if you sense reluctance, back off. You need to get him used to you again. Understand?" Beverly found it very good advice and promised to follow it. She went looking for him and found him out back. He had a massive yard, easily 4 times the size of their, or her, house. It was meticulously groomed. His building stood shining under a fresh coat of paint and a new tin roof to match the house. When she saw him, she just stopped and observed. He came out of the building carrying an elaborate bird feeder in one arm and a small girl, 3 or 4 years old, in the other. She was hugging his neck, giggling and raining kisses on his cheeks. He was smiling, and it suddenly hit Beverly like a knife through the heart. She would never be able to give him kids now at their age. It dawned on her how selfish she had been. Career had superseded family, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it now. Beverly forced her mind to clear to keep him in the moment. She had to stay in the moment. There was always adoption if they got back together. Her mind was clear now. The fog of power and arrogance had washed away. If he still wanted a family, they could adopt, maybe more than one. "Who's your girlfriend, honey?" she asked, hoping he caught the honey, but he just smiled. "This beautiful young woman is Arie. We're good friends. I'm a little too old for her, but when she grows up, I see more than one broken heart in her wake." He set her down. "Arie, do you think you can carry this by yourself? If not, I'm going to put it on the table here, and you can get your sister to help you. And I didn't forget my promise. I'll be over tomorrow to put it up for you." Arie said hello to Beverly in a breathless little girl voice that made you just want to hug her to death. She toddled over to a stunning young woman, babbling excitedly and tugging on her hand. They approached Beverly and Dave, smiling. "Thank you, Dave. You don't know what it means to her. She watches the birdhouse you gave her for hours and was thrilled when a bluebird family took up residence. Plus, she's almost worn out the bird book you gave her. I had to read the names to her, and she's committed them to memory. We'll be going down the road and she'll name them off. Robin, Bluebird, English Sparrow, Crow. Her preschool is so impressed they've organized a visit to the local aviary. She wants you to come too if you can get off from work. We'll see if I can spare the time. I'd love to. I should probably go. She'll be so wired it'll take both of us to wrangle her." The woman looked like she was still in her teens. To use the common term, the girl was built and wasn't averse to flaunting it. Her shorts weren't quite Daisy Dukes, and her halter top was modest, but it did nothing to mask her physical appeal. She also had the prettiest set of lips Beverly had ever seen. She nearly lost it when the woman put her hand on Dave's arm and stood on tiptoes to kiss him. He blushed, and Beverly was furious to see her lipstick on his cheek. The woman grinned at her, and Beverly knew she was being baited. "You must be his wife. I'm sorry, but after a while we all thought you were fictional. I'm Marsha. Dave and I are neighbors." It took every bit of self-control Beverly had not to slap the smirk off her face. "Oh, I'm very much alive. I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot more of me from now on." They stared at each other until Marsha smiled and sauntered off, putting a little extra swish in her shorts as she strode away. Beverly turned to Dave, pissed and ready to argue, but was stopped cold by a smirk. "Calm down, hun. She's just turned 18. Her parents were drug addicts, and one day they got hold of a bad batch and overdosed. She's living with her grandfather now, and frankly, he has no idea what to do with her. I like her, and I adore her little sister. Besides, how does it bother you exactly? You haven't contacted me in 11 weeks and had precious little to say for the 2 years before. I just assumed you wrote me off as a bad business decision and moved on." Beverly opened her mouth to say something but couldn't find the words. Instead, she just burst into tears and walked off. Damn him! Why did he always equate everything to business? Of course, she knew the answer but couldn't face it. Susan swooped in, shooting lasers at Dave, and herded Beverly into the bathroom so she could compose herself. Even as she sniffled, she admired the huge whirlpool tub, wondering how it would be to soak in it, especially with Dave. She took a few minutes but finally got her composure back, especially when she remembered he called her out, something he hadn't done in, well, she couldn't remember. She mentioned this to Susan. Susan told her he had finally stopped holding his feelings in. Beverly took that as a good sign. I kind of deserved what he said, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. I came here to try and rekindle my marriage, and running away isn't a good start. So, Susan, stay out of it. No matter what gets said, this is like heavyweight boxing. I'm going to take my lumps and keep swinging. Maybe I'll get lucky. Or maybe you'll get knocked on your butt. Hang in there, honey. And if you start losing too badly, swing below the belt. Either way, you'll get his attention. Composed, Beverly went back to the party to find Dave sitting at a table with an older gentleman, Arie firmly planted in his lap. He started to stand, but she told him not to. Taking a seat beside him, Arie looked at Beverly for a few minutes before reaching out and touching her pendant. The older gentleman spoke. "Arie, stop! Don't bother the nice lady." Beverly surprised both of them by holding out her arms, and Arie scooted over. "Do you like it? Dave got it for me a long time ago. It's one of my favorite things in the world." "Pretty?" Arie said. "Yes, it is, baby. Maybe someday in the future, some nice young man who means as much to you as Dave means to me will give you one. If he does, cherish it. Remember every time you look at it or wear it, who gave it to you and why. Now, if you promise to be really careful, you can wear it for a bit. Can you do that? Promise?" Arie looked up at Beverly, a solemn expression on her face. "I promise." Beverly glanced at Dave and asked for his help. "Honey, a little help here?" He seemed lost, not sure what to say. "Beverly, you don't—" "Nonsense. She already promised to take care of it. Right, precious?" Beverly felt his hand shake while she enjoyed his fingers on her neck, the most intimate touch they'd shared in months. She gently placed the necklace around the little girl's neck as she giggled and cooed. Beverly carried her into the hall, putting her in front of a large mirror so she could see herself. Arie clapped her hands in joy, which made Beverly smile. It took so little to make a child happy sometimes. After that, Arie stuck to Beverly like glue, leaving occasionally to check on her sister, who was enjoying the attention of one of the young men from Dave's office. They were on his front porch in rockers, so Beverly gently rocked and sang her a song her mother used to sing to her. She felt eyes on her and looked up. Dave was staring, tears visible in his eyes. He turned abruptly and walked into the house. She couldn't very well chase him with a sleeping child in her arms, so she continued to rock. A few minutes later, he was back, reaching down to get Arie. "Come on, let's put her in a bedroom for her nap. She'll be awake soon, full of energy." Beverly followed him into a bedroom where he laid Arie down, covering her with a light blanket. "Won't it scare her to wake up alone?" "No, she knows where she is. As soon as she wakes, though, she'll let us know." He stood looking down at the sleeping angel, almost touching. He turned to go, and Beverly grabbed him, pulling his head down to hers and kissed him, not a little peck, but a full-blown kiss full of passion. He started a little, then kissed her back, giving just as good as he got. When he finally pulled back, questions were in his eyes. Beverly put a finger to his lips. "Don't think. Enjoy." Then she kissed him again before pulling back and leading him out of the room. It was enough for now. Marsha met them on the back deck, questions in her eyes. "She's asleep. We took her in and she looks to be out for a while." Marsha looked at Beverly oddly. "Thank you. You've been really nice to her. She doesn't get that much." "Odd. Really. Dave told me you didn't like kids." Flames must have been pulsing out of her eyes. "How dare you share such an intimate bit of information before she could blow up?" he spoke. "That's not necessarily true, Marsha. I said she didn't want children of her own. She seems to get along fine with the ones we've been around." "Oh," said Marsha. "Why didn't you want kids?" "Marsha, mind your manners. You don't know this woman well enough to ask such personal questions. Leave it alone." Marsha was immediately contrite. Apparently Dave was important to her. I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" Something about the way she suddenly looked so young and helpless touched Beverly. She hugged her unexpectedly. "Hush, baby. It's all right. I know you didn't mean anything, so there's no harm done. Come on, let's get those tears dried and fix you up a little." Dave stood with his jaw hanging as Beverly led Marsha back to the infamous bathroom. It was sure getting a lot of use today. She got a cloth and towel and gently patted Marsha's face, saying soothing words to calm her down. Marsha hugged her like she was afraid to let go. When she finally calmed down, Beverly had her wash her face, envying the smooth skin of youth. Marsha wore no makeup, her hair in a simple ponytail. "I'm all right now. We can go back," Marsha said. "Let's give it a minute. Let your ponytail down and I'll straighten it a little." Marsha obeyed Beverly like a child, and Beverly sat her in front of the mirror, straightening out her tangles. Without thinking, Beverly started redoing Marsha's hair, putting it in an elaborate braid. It made her even more attractive. Determined to go further, she used a bit of blush, a hint of mascara, and a light pink lipstick on her. Marsha sat silently, her eyes getting bigger as she watched herself transform. When Beverly was done, Marsha looked like she belonged on the cover of a teen magazine. Wow. Just wow. What did you do to me? Beverly saw her lips start to quiver. "Stop. You'll make your mascara run. I didn't do anything, child. It was there the whole time. You're a diamond, baby. You just needed a little polishing. Now let's go back and knock them dead. That young man you were talking to will wish he'd spent more time with you, I'll bet." Conversation almost stopped when they returned, and soon more than one man was vying for Marsha's attention. Beverly returned to Dave, standing beside him as he manned the grill. "Were we ever that young?" she asked. He smiled a bittersweet smile. "If we were, I can't remember it. It makes you feel good, doesn't it? Watching the age-old mating dance?" "It does. And even if you don't, I do. One memory forever enshrined in my heart is the first time I kissed you. We were, what, 19? I was still a virgin then. Boy, we sure got over that quick, didn't we? I think I knew after the first date we were destined to be together. What happened to us?" "Life happened, we grew up, our priorities changed. Suddenly, the thought of ducking out of work and spending the day playing wasn't as important as making a meeting or coming in early to beat the competition so you'd have a leg up when promotion time came along. Or you couldn't go on a spontaneous road trip because you had things left over from the week before and needed to finish them and start on the new week so you'd gain ground. Good or bad, Beverly, we grew up, and now we're growing old." He stopped suddenly, but she knew what he was thinking. They were growing old and not together. She had to derail the train fast. "Will you show me your garden?" He smiled and led her over. It was a lot larger than she thought it would be. It was just like him, though, neat and orderly, teeming with plants. She had no idea what most of them were, and he named them off for her: black, crimson, Rutgers, and yellow boy tomatoes, straight neck and spaghetti squash, Italian grazer zucchini, French purple pole beans, butter beans and bush string beans, poblano and cubanelle peppers. The flowers, especially the marigolds, were natural pest deterrents, and the mulch helped retain moisture and enrich the soil. It almost completely eliminated having to pull weeds. Arie popped up, done with her nap. She tugged on his pants leg and he picked her up without a second thought. "Pick," she said, pointing to a bright yellow tomato. Dave carried her over, set her down gently, and Beverly was surprised when the little girl took hold of the tomato and twisted carefully until it came off in her hand. She held it up to Beverly. "Eat," Dave laughed. "She wants you to wash it so she can have a sandwich. I've taught her not to eat anything until it's washed. I use organic pesticides, but they're still pesticides, and I want to be safe." "Good idea." Beverly held out her hands and Arie toddled over. She hugged her as they walked back, turning to Dave so he couldn't see the moisture in her eyes. Her maternal instincts she wasn't even aware she had, were surging strongly. Marsha came over, but Arie refused to leave Beverly's arms. "Well, all right then. I'll help Mr. Dave plate the food." "When she gets her sandwich, bring her outside. I'll save you a seat," Marsha said, smiling as she walked off. Beverly washed the tomato thoroughly, found the bread and mayo, sliced it, and built Arie her sandwich. She sat and watched as Arie instructed her to put more tomato until the whole thing was on the sandwich. This is going to be messy, Beverly thought as she carried the plate back outside. Marsha had saved a spot between her and Dave, and Arie spent her time going from one lap to another. She had half the sandwich, half a buttered ear of corn, and half a hot dog. It was still a lot of food for a little girl. Beverly was right. It was messy, and Marsha had to take her for a change of clothes. They sat under the party lights Dave had placed in the trees, watching the sun go down. She was surprised to see there was no alcohol. Dave told her privately it was because Marsha's grandfather was a recovering alcoholic. He left shortly after, though, and Dave pulled out a cooler full of beer along with 4 bottles of wine. Not enough to get smashed, but enough to give everyone a pleasant glow. He had music playing with speakers situated around the patio, surrounding them with gentle instrumentals and languid love songs. Beverly snuggled into Dave, hoping for the best, and he responded by putting his arm around her. She almost cried with happiness. Marsha and one of her admirers, along with Sal and Susan, were dancing, swaying together across the grass. Young love and old, connecting in the soft lights. The music changed to a love ballad popular when they were in college. They had danced many a slow dance to that tune. Dave stood, pulling her along. Beverly had just enough time to kick off her sandals. Then she was in his arms, feeling 21 all over again. She held him as tightly as she could and soaked his shirt with her tears. One hand reached up to push her hair back and caressed her cheek. They stayed together for a few minutes after the song ended. She stepped back, noticing Susan was standing with her mouth open while Marsha grinned. The tears started again, and soon they were in a 3-way hug, all of them sniffling. This led to another trip to the bathroom. This was getting to be a habit. She started to fix her makeup one more time, thought better of it, and washed her face. The people left, thanking Dave for the evening. Marsha hugged them both tightly. She had a sad face when she pulled back. "What's the matter, baby?" Beverly asked. I wish you guys had been my parents. Maybe I would have had the love I deserved. The love Arie is going to need. I'm scared, really scared. Now that I'm 18, the support check for me will stop coming. Arie will still get one, but it isn't much. Gramps is already uncomfortable with us being there. If the money dries up, he'll kick us out. Beverly was shocked beyond words, and Dave had an expression on his face she hoped she would never see again. Marsha, I want you to listen to me. I'm right next door. If things get bad, you come here immediately. Immediately. Understand? If I'm not here, lock the doors and call us. One or the other. We will be here for you and Arie. Say you understand. Beverly watched, shocked, wondering what kind of hell their life had been. Snapping out of it, she hugged Marsha again. She gave Marsha her card and scribbled her private number on the back. Save this. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call. You understand? Marsha was crying again and took turns clinging to them. When she finally composed herself, she left with a sad, slow walk until she was out of sight. Dave walked over to the porch swing, lost in thought. Beverly sat down beside him and took his hand. She may have been the big bad CEO, but when things really got rough, one could depend on Dave to take care of it. What are we going to do? She asked. About what? He asked, coming out of his reverie. About the girls. We can't leave them in a situation like that. What do you suggest we do? I'd take them in a heartbeat if I could. Why don't you? I don't know how it would work. She's 18 now, Beverly said. She's legally an adult, so she can live where she wants. Since she is legally an adult, she can petition the courts for full custody of Arie. I'm sure the grandfather would go along with that just to get rid of them if what she says is true. Here's what we do. I'll take charge of the legal stuff. That's my strong suit. Yours is sales, so you need to sell her on the idea of being an adult and doing what's best for both of them. Won't it look bad? A single older man taking a young woman and child in? Beverly finally let some of her temper loose. You listen to me, Dave Waxman. You are not a single man. You have a wife, and she is not inclined to be referred to as the former Mrs. Waxman. It took all of this to wake me up, Dave, and I intend to never sleep again. I missed you so badly, honey. But introspection has led me to understand that what happened is all on me. I took you for granted for so long that I got used to it. I got bad advice, went a little power mad, and screwed my life up in ways I could never imagine. Tonight was the first step on my way back to you. Do you still love me? It took everything she had to ask that question. She was scared to death of the answer. He looked thoughtful, and it filled her with dread. I love the you I fell in love with, not the you that you've become. If we manage to start again, things will have to be a lot different. I'm not asking you to be submissive, Beverly, but I would insist on you acknowledging me as an equal that deserves your respect and a good bit more of your time than you've given me the last few years. I woke up after I left. I have no desire at all to go back to that life, and I'm damn sure never stepping foot in that house again. I need to know in my heart that if the situation ever arises, you would pick me over the business every time. Honestly, I don't think you can do it. Beverly was crying despite her best efforts not to. He took her hand. Honey, all that being said, I'd really like to try again. I miss waking up beside you, the affectionate gestures we used to share before you got too important. There are a few things we need to do, though. The first is to find a competent marriage counselor who can guide us back to each other. We need to set some ground rules on how we allocate our efforts, making sure there's always time for each other. Does this sound reasonable to you? Would you be willing to live here in this house if we get back together? It was too much. He wanted to save their marriage. He still loved her. She broke down, sobbing hysterically for at least 5 minutes while he held her, gently stroking her back. Eventually, she got herself together enough to answer him. He waited, wondering if she understood what he told her. He'd never accept second billing ever again. If she wanted to stay married, it had to be to him, not the job. Honestly, he didn't think she could do it. She really surprised him with her answer. I agree to almost all of it. I'm not worried about the house. It's nice, but without you there, it may as well be a box under an overpass. I'm sure the commute will suck until I get used to it, but if it helps save my marriage, I'll get over it pretty quickly. She sighed. I lost direction, honey, and I want to find my way back home. I need a guide, and I'm depending on you. The counselor is a really good idea. Do you want to find one, or shall I? We'll both have to agree, of course, before we commit. It was a few minutes before she could go on, crying into his shoulder. She finally pulled back, wiping her eyes. One of our first priorities should be to re-establish our intimacy. I know it's probably too soon for sharing a bed, but can I stay here tonight? I really need to wake up in the same house as you. As far as priorities, you are my main focus right now. I still have to work thanks to my blunder. I'm not in a very good position, so I have to really put effort into everything I do. But I will make sure I'm home at a reasonable hour. If something comes up that I absolutely can't walk away from, I'll call immediately. I'm willing to put forth maximum effort to ensure this never happens again. He believed her conditionally. Truth be told, once he got over the hurt that she had caused him, old feelings had started to return. Most of their adult lives were entwined, and at the end of the day, he decided he didn't want to break them. He was serious about a counselor. If ever a couple needed professional help, it was them. She was saying all the right words, and he was curious to see if she meant them. All right, you can have the room Arie took her nap in. It has its own private bath, and if you need something to sleep in, we'll find you a shirt. Agreed. She surprised him by shaking her head. No, I saw that big whirlpool tub in the master bath. I've been carrying around a load of tension lately, and I think soaking in it would do me a world of good. Soon he heard her in the tub singing softly. She had a really good voice, and he tried to remember the last time he'd heard her sing. He couldn't, so it must have been a really long time ago. It was one of her tells. She always felt extra happy when she sang. 40 minutes later, she came out wearing a t-shirt that barely covered her bottom. She caught him looking and grinned, flipping it up as she exited the room. He stood in shock at the sight of her bare butt, listening to her giggles fade down the hall. His eyes flew open, and the first thing he looked at was the clock. 2:30 in the morning. There was just enough moonlight to see her standing at the end of the bed. Beth, I couldn't sleep knowing you were in the same house and not in the same bed. Can I please sleep with you? That's all I want. Just to snuggle and feel your arms around me. Please, Dave. He could have sent her back down the hall, but he didn't. Instead, he pulled back the covers. She slid in, trembling, and he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her tightly to him. He felt her tears, but said nothing. Soon after, he heard her breathing level out and knew she was asleep. He lay awake for a long time, wondering about their future, before drifting off with a smile on his face. Her eyes popped open, and she wondered what hotel room she was in. Then she felt his arms around her, and it all came rushing back. She was in bed with her husband. She was about to get intimate when a bundle of energy came rushing in. "Mr. Dave, wake up!" Marsha stood at the door with her hands over her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I told her to stay downstairs, but as soon as my back was turned, she took off." Dave grinned, tickling Arie softly. She wriggled and cooed, loving every minute of it. "It's all right, Marsha. Now I have 2 beauties in my bed. How lucky can a man be?" Beverly saw Marsha's expression and knew something wasn't right. "What's wrong, honey?" Well, we are. Gramps hasn't gone grocery shopping lately. I was going to ask if I could give some of your cereal to Arie. Marsha looked embarrassed beyond words, and Beverly's heart went out to her. She doesn't need cereal, honey. She needs a good breakfast. Give us a minute to get dressed, and we'll come down and fix something or take you out if he doesn't have enough. All right? Marsha couldn't talk. She just nodded and gathered up a squirming Arie. Come on, Arie. Let's get you some juice while Mr. Dave and Mrs. Beverly get dressed. As soon as the door closed, Beverly whirled around, eyes blazing. I'm sorry, honey. I was hoping for some long overdue loving, but it can wait. Really? What kind of man doesn't make sure there's enough food in the house for his children? Where's your robe? She snatched it off the closet hook and was out the door. Dave followed a little more slowly after answering the call of nature. She was in the kitchen with all the cupboards open, frowning. Dave was about to explain that as a single guy, there was not much of a need to keep a stocked pantry, but he thought better of it. Beverly didn't give him a chance, marching out to her car and getting the bag, as Dave always called it. One day, she was at a business luncheon and a vendor spilled red wine all over her light blue dress. She had to excuse herself, drive home, and change. After that, there was always a bag in her trunk that contained at least 2 outfits. Choosing the most casual dress, she was back, telling Dave to get his butt in gear. They had children to feed. A very quick shower and shave later, Dave was waiting by the door. That was almost as fast, and he couldn't help but admire her. She always chose tasteful clothes, but was not averse to showing off her toned body. They almost didn't go out for breakfast when Beverly found out there was no car seat for Arie. But when Dave told her that they were less than half a mile from a really nice breakfast buffet, she decided to sit in the back with Arie until they got there. The girls consumed mass quantities. Dave looked at Bev and knew she had the same thought. These children were missing meals. Her eyes were dark with anger, and Arie asked if he was mad at her. Dave straightened his face and told her he was because she had eaten the last pancake. Then he grinned and told her it was a good thing they could always get more. There was a mall across the road, and in a tone that brooked no argument, Beverly told Dave to pull into its lot. They were there for 2 hours. First, she went to a department store and bought the best car seat they had, banishing Dave to the parking lot to put it in. By the time he got back, they were in full shopping mode. Beverly made sure they both got 3 outfits apiece. Arie loved it, but Marsha seemed embarrassed. Bev gently hugged her. Please let me do this. We never had children, and just once I want to pretend I'm out with my daughters doing mother-daughter stuff. Arie got bored pretty quickly, so Dave walked her around while Marsha and Beverly finished up. Their last stop was a grocery store, and Arie rode as Dave pushed, while Bev and Marsha discussed everything they picked up like they were going to use it to cook the Last Supper. Arie contributed by putting everything she could reach in the buggy, especially while they were in the snack aisle. Beverly started to put some of them back, but Arie made big eyes at her and she left them. It was a quiet ride home. They were unloading the groceries when Beverly suddenly asked, "How many bedrooms do we have?" They found it very interesting when she said, "We have 4. Why?" She just rolled her eyes, took the girls, and went upstairs. 10 minutes later, she called him. They found her standing in the biggest guest room, the one with the attached bath. "This is the girls' room now. It will be their sanctuary if things go bad. You need to make sure Marsha has keys so she can come over any time, understand?" Marsha stood there, wavering between hope and fear. Arie was in Beverly's arms, almost asleep. Dave saw Beverly's determined CEO look and smiled. "Well, so it shall be. I leave it to you girls to decorate it." He turned to Marsha. "Do you understand what we're offering you?" She flew into his arms and cried her heart out. Beverly put the sleeping Arie down and joined the hug. After a few minutes, Dave went into the living room to sit on his favorite recliner, trying to comprehend how his life had changed so much in the last 24 hours. Beverly came down a few minutes later and surprised him by joining him on the oversized recliner. Once she got comfortable, she started talking softly while gently stroking his chest. "This changes everything, doesn't it? I'm going back to the old house to pack what I need. I'm taking Marsha with me to help, so you're on childcare duty until we get back. Do not feed her junk, understand? We'll be back in 3 hours." She stood, then stopped, bending down to kiss him. He could see the fear in her eyes as she spoke. "That is, if you want me back. He stood and hugged her. We have a lot of issues to resolve, honey. Living apart from each other is not going to help solve them. You were always better at organizing things, so I'll leave it to you. This probably won't be easy, but I love you enough to try. Are you in? Was she in? What a stupid question. She was about to use every metaphor in the English language before she caught herself and smiled through her tears. I'm in. His smile gave her a lot of comfort. She grabbed Marsha from upstairs and hustled her out the door. Marsha was quiet for a while before she asked, "Why are you doing this? Helping us?" Beverly thought carefully before she answered. If they were to have any kind of relationship, she didn't want to start it off by lying to her. First and foremost, I'm doing it because I like you and honestly want to help you. You're in a situation not of your own making, alone with a small child. What decent human being wouldn't want to help you? Secondly, you seem to be important to Dave and by extension to me. You know, we were separated. This weekend is hopefully the first step of a long journey home. She stopped for a second to gather her thoughts. One of the things I discovered while we were separated was that Dave really wanted children, and I was selfish enough to deny that to him. Then I met you and Arie, and emotions I didn't even know I had came surging out of me. Now I bitterly regret my decision not to give him children. You girls are my do-over. I'll never be your mother, but I'd like to be the best mother figure I can be to you and Arie, no matter what happens between Dave and me. You probably don't understand, but I would honestly like to try. May I? Tears glistened in Marsha's eyes as she reached over and took Beverly's hand. Well, then you can count me in on your campaign to get Dave back. After all, for a perfect family, both parents need to be present, right? Beverly had to pull over. Marsha held her while she cried, and she reveled in her touch. When she finally got herself together, she let her go and kissed her softly on the cheek. Thank you, baby. When she called her baby, Marsha started sniffling, so they hugged again. Beverly then hit her with a bombshell. To truly be my daughter, you need to live with us full-time. Now that you're 18, you can petition the courts for full custody of Arie. We'll pay for all the legal fees if you agree. It should be pretty simple. And when we're done, no one can take her away from us. You need to start practicing saying, "Yes, Mom." Now would be good. Beverly lost feeling in her hand because Marsha's grip was so strong. It came out more as a sob than a statement, but she understood it as though she had shouted it, "Yes, Mom." They wandered through the house, basically cleaning out closets and dresser drawers. It took them 4 trips to get all the stuff in the car, filling the trunk and most of the back seat. You have a beautiful house, but it doesn't feel like Dave's. This feels warm, you know, Marsha said. Beverly did know. You're exactly right. I've lived in the cold long enough. Maybe that's why we're selling it. I plan to never spend another night there. I find I love being warm. They came back with the car stuffed. Arie and Dave came out with Arie in his arms, and Dave asked Beverly why she didn't take her truck. She playfully slapped his arm. Now you bring that up? Next time, we'll use the truck. Think about what you'd like for dinner while we unpack, Beverly said. Dave decided to impress Bev with a simple stir-fry using chicken breasts, zucchini, carrots, bell peppers, onions, mushrooms, and chopped Brussels sprouts. He served it over rice with a surprise. Parfait glasses filled with chopped tomatoes of different colors, basil leaves, olive oil, and a touch of vinegar. It looked appealing. Arie would have eaten only the tomatoes if allowed, but she had a temper tantrum and got her first experience with parental controls. Arie, do you want to grow up to be as pretty as your sister? Dave asked. Arie nodded, unsure where this was going. Then you have to eat different foods. Try this, Beverly said, feeding her a spoonful. Arie's eyes widened with delight. More, please, she said, looking at Beverly with gratitude. Thank you, Beverly, for helping her learn something new, Dave added. Arie smiled and said, Thank you, making Beverly's heart swell with pride. After dinner, Beverly took Arie to clean up while Marsha sent Dave to the living room. Arie returned in pajamas and crawled into Dave's lap. They watched Frozen, and Arie managed to stay awake for most of it. It became her favorite movie, and they would watch it countless times over the years. Marsha went next door and returned shortly. Grandpa is gone, and the door is locked, she said. Beverly could see the anger in Dave's eyes and put a hand on his shoulder. Good thing we got you those pajamas. Now go get ready for bed, she told Marsha. Marsha came out in conservative shorty pajamas. Beverly grinned at Dave's expression. "Only one of them is a little girl, honey." They were all in bed by 10, as both had work in the morning. Beverly came out of the bath in a sexy baby doll that flattered her figure. She saw Dave watching and twirled. His eyes widened when he saw there were no panties. She giggled. "It comes with panties, but I figured it would be a waste of time to put them on. You're 5 months behind on your husband duties, and I expect you to make up for it tonight." Then, in a small voice, she added, "That is, if you want to." He stood up and slipped the gown over her head. "In my opinion, you wasted time putting anything on. I love you, Beverly." Just like that, her amorous mood vanished. She was too overcome with emotion to be aroused. He started kissing her, stroking her body in his familiar way, and she melted. It didn't take long for the fire to return. She grabbed a pillow. "It's to scream into, baby. You know how much I enjoy making love to you and how loud I can get. We have children in the house, and I don't want to wake them, so I'll be biting this pillow a lot tonight." "I hope so," he replied. She didn't know how many times she bit down, but it was enough to put a hole in the pillow. She was glad pillows were cheap. It would be worth it. Their alarms were set, but Arie decided to be their wake-up call. Beverly was glad she made Dave put his boxers on and had slipped her gown on with the panties this time. They snuggled her for a while until Marsha appeared and took Arie while they showered and dressed. They played a little but couldn't get serious due to time constraints. Marsha had cooked breakfast, and they sat down to eat as any suburban family would. Arie insisted on a kiss goodbye, and they also kissed Marsha on the cheek, not wanting to leave her out. Marsha had a driver's license, so she took Beverly's car and dropped Dave off to avoid swapping the car seat. Beverly drove Dave's truck to work. Jen burst into the office 3 minutes after Beverly was seated. "Does that truck belong to her?" "I think it does." She couldn't help grinning. "It belongs to my husband, if that's what you're asking. Now go to work, nosy Nellie." Jen bounced through the door 5 minutes early, bearing coffee and pastries. Beverly refused to say a word until they had their snack and were sipping their coffee. "Dave and I are back together, Jen. We have things to work out and counseling will probably be involved, so I may miss a few hours now and then. It probably won't be as easy as I'd like, and there will be times when I'm depressed and snappy, but bear with me. I know I've probably never told you, but you're my rock here in the office. I'm going to need to lean on you more than usual. With that in mind, I've got approval to raise your salary by 7%. It's not a lot, but it's the best I can do. Thank you for standing by me." Jen was both elated and saddened by the news. Her husband had just gotten a promotion and would be transferring to another state in 3 months. They both cried as she shared the news. "I still have 11 more weeks, boss. I'll help you find someone new, someone who will be as loyal as I am." They hugged and went back to work. Later, as Beverly drove home, it hit her. Marsha. She talked it over with Dave, who thought it was an excellent idea. Arie was a bundle of energy, loving on both of them. Beverly gave her a bath and read her a story until she gently rocked her to sleep. She passed Arie off to Marsha and got comfortable on the couch, snuggled up under Dave's arm. Marsha came back downstairs and they called her over. "Marsha, could you sit for a moment? We have some things to discuss with you. First, how come you're still here? We care a lot about both of you, honey. You know that, right? You can tell us anything." Marsha was unsettled all evening, and when they asked, the waterworks started. "Grandpa threw us out when we didn't come home last night. He went into a rage. I think he's drinking again. He told me I had to go, but Arie was staying because he wanted the money. I came straight here and locked the doors. He won't let us have our clothes, our records, any of the things we need. What am I going to do?" Beverly grabbed her and put her on the sofa between them. They both comforted her until she calmed down. That night, as Beverly snuggled in their bed, she remembered Marsha had said, "I came straight home." That made her very happy. They discussed it as soon as Marsha was rational again. "First, you need to go to court and petition for custody right away. Tomorrow, if we can get you a lawyer, you'll give them this address as your home. The first thing they're going to want to know is if you can support her. Right now, you're unemployed, so that may be a problem. Have you ever held a job before?" Marsha tearfully admitted she had worked at a few burger places, but not for very long. Dave had a small smile on his face, knowing Beverly's mind was already at work. "Well then, the first thing we need to do is get you employed. Fortunately for you, I have some openings at my company. You'll start Wednesday after you fill out the paperwork." Marsha asked timidly what she would be doing. "It just so happens I'll be needing a personal assistant in 3 months. It requires at least a 2-year degree, so you'll have to take classes at night. If you fail or stop going, you automatically lose your job. I have faith in you, honey. Don't let us down." Marsha finally stopped crying, and Beverly and Dave went to bed. He kissed Beverly firmly as soon as she slid under the sheets. "Not that I'm complaining, but what was that for?" "That's for what you did for Marsha. You know, we're going to have to arrange childcare for Arie. Luckily for us, Sal offers free daycare for his employees, so I'll enroll her tomorrow. She'll ride back and forth with me, and Marsha will ride with you. Should we look at getting her transportation?" They got quiet for a while, and he asked what she was thinking. "What are we doing here, Dave? We're back together. Something I thought might not happen. And we're taking in 2 girls, something I never saw coming. Are we pushing too hard? I don't want anything to come between us now. Should we turn our backs on them, send them back to their grandfather, and wish them the best of luck?" Her grip on him got tighter. "Absolutely not. If something happens and we can't keep them, I'll personally make sure they land somewhere safe. They're better off here than anywhere else. I'd like to keep them as long as we can. Please, honey." "Oh, we're definitely keeping them. Marsha's legally an adult, even if she's not ready to function like one. Arie is the one I'm worried about. She's 4, and if we keep her, she'll see us as her parents. Are you okay with that?" She was quiet for a minute. 2 years ago, I would have run from them. 3 months ago, I would have hesitated. But now, as long as you're part of the package, it fills me with joy. I don't know how to do it, but I'd like to try." It came out of his mouth before he thought. "We'll make it, baby. Both of us made mistakes in the past. You should have given some of your attention to us instead of focusing only on climbing the corporate ladder. I should have been firmer and reminded you that while you might be my boss at work, we are partners in life. These are mistakes I won't repeat. I plan on being more open with my thoughts and more assertive in my actions to make sure it never happens again. I still think counseling is a good idea. Once things settle down with our kids, we should look into that." He felt tears on his shoulder and wondered if he had gone too far. He asked, and she playfully slapped his arm. "These aren't tears of sadness. They're tears of joy. I never thought I'd hear you say 'our kids,' and I'm so happy to hear it. They're the missing link. We got so focused on ourselves, well, I did, that we forgot what life is like with children. They force you to prioritize. Suddenly, it's not all about you anymore. It's about them. I want to experience that so much. Now, let's go to sleep. I have a daughter to train in the business world tomorrow, and you have to enroll our baby in daycare. I'd love to see Sal's face when you show up with Arie tomorrow." "We need to take tomorrow off, Beth. At least half a day. Marsha needs a wardrobe, especially since her grandfather locked her out of the house. Arie does too. I need to see Sal about daycare because technically, Arie is an employee's child now. You need to line up a lawyer for Marsha's custody. We need to move fast on that. Sometime tomorrow, I'm going to see their grandfather and see if I can get him on board with what's happening. It'll make the transfer of custody much easier." "Agreed," she said in her business voice. "And you're right about transportation. She'll need a car to get back and forth to school. We can do that in a couple of months after she's settled into her job. What kind should we get her?" "Let's wait 2 months and then get her input. No hot rods, nothing too expensive. A starter car should be safe and reliable. Your end of the world, honey, you can handle that. Now we need to sleep. Lots to do tomorrow." They woke with smiles and a plan, thanks to their personal little alarm clock. It occurred to Beverly that they'd have to make sure the door was locked when they were intimate. She giggled at the thought. Marsha didn't quite know what to think, and Arie had no clue about the changes coming into her life. Beverly hustled them into the car for a trip to the mall. She showed Marsha the type of clothes she needed for a professional appearance, and Marsha chose well. Then she told her to pick some casual clothes. Marsha selected a few mini-skirts, well-fitting jeans, basic tees, and a couple of cute tops. Beverly sent her to pick her own underwear, reminding her to consider how it would look under her professional clothes. Next, Beverly focused on Arie. It was all a wonder to her, but soon she was giggling and cooing as Beverly helped her try on several outfits and some pretty dresses. Arie didn't like the shoe store until Beverly showed her a pair of pink sneakers, and then she cooperated. Dave met them for lunch and tried to act interested in their purchases. Finally, they gave up and decided he'd have to see them one at a time. Dave switched the car seat to his truck and they waved as he and Arie pulled out. Jen was surprised when Beverly arrived with such a young woman. She was even more surprised when Beverly explained, "See if she's trainable and has any business skills. I need total honesty after you work with her for a few days. If she's competent, she'll take your place. If not, we'll find her another position." "Who is this girl to you?" Jen asked. Beverly flushed as she explained how she came to know Marsha. Jen laughed. "I wish I was around to watch. Does she call you Mom?" "Not yet. I'd like to hear it someday." She showed Jen pictures of Arie, most with Dave holding her. "I'm afraid she's going to be a daddy's girl. I can deal with that as long as I get the big one. It'll be easier with her." Jen giggled. "Really? A teen as pretty as she is? What's going to happen the first time she brings home a boy you don't think is good enough for her? You better get used to sleepless nights." Beverly hadn't thought about that. She wondered if Dave still had that old double-barreled shotgun he'd inherited from his grandfather, and if it still worked. Marsha was completely overwhelmed by the whole experience and just followed Jen around like a puppy. They took Marsha to HR and got her paperwork started. She came in at the lowest entry-level salary, $22,000 a year. Marsha thought it was a fortune. Beverly just smiled and said, "Wait until you have to pay your own bills. It won't seem like nearly as much then." Seeing Marsha frown, she quickly added, "That's years down the road, honey. I refuse to let you move out until you have at least a degree. Then we'll see how you feel about it." Marsha was quiet on the way home. Beverly asked her how she liked her day. "It overwhelmed me, but I'll learn. Look at the role model I have." Beverly glowed, but then Marsha spoke again in a small, shy voice. "I may have made a mistake today. One of the other secretaries asked who I was, and Jen told them I was your daughter. I was so shocked I didn't correct her. The word is out. You may have noticed the strange looks." Beverly had noticed, but shrugged it off. She was too focused on saving the company to worry about looks. "Don't tell them any differently. Maybe they'll treat you better. I can think of worse things to be called and have been called." They arrived home to find Dave and his little helper had prepared dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables. They looked like they had slaved in the salt mines. He wished he had recorded the look on Saul's face when he told him why he was late and what he needed. Arie was in his arms, her little hands locked around his neck. Saul immediately called Susan, who must have set a speed record getting to the plant. She had that grandmother vibe down just right, and soon Arie was in her arms while they talked. Dave explained the whole wonderful weekend to them. Susan had tears in her eyes, which confused Arie. Saul looked a little misty-eyed and made a comment about the cleaning crew not dusting well, but he was smiling the whole time. In no time at all, Susan had Arie by the hand, leading her to the preschool. Arie wasn't used to being with kids her age and was a little clingy, but the teacher soon coaxed her into joining a game. An hour later, she barely acknowledged Dave when he left. He gave Susan and Saul their history as he knew it and asked if they knew any good family law experts. Susan was on the phone immediately since one of the boards she sat on specialized in children in difficult situations. She got a family law judge to get them an appointment with what she considered the best expert in the field. The appointment was after normal hours to help them. He couldn't wait to tell Beverly. Susan brought him back down to earth with some pointed questions. "So, one weekend with your wife and having these children dumped in your life makes everything all right?" "Not in the least, Susan. We have a lot of feelings and old wounds to sort out. The children won't make it any easier. We plan to find a good marriage counselor, and later on, if things work out, we'll visit a family expert to smooth the path for all of us. I know this, though. We still love each other. We are also developing strong feelings for those two girls. You know how goal-oriented and driven Bev can be when she wants something, and she wants the whole package. I think this weekend has shown her what we missed out on by not having children, and she sees this as a chance to correct an old mistake. It'll be up to me to keep her balanced, and up to her not to return to her old ways. The first hint of that, and I'll be all over her. So no, it's not going to be an easy path, but it's one we're both willing to walk." Saul grinned. "Well done, Dave. I can tell you from experience it will be worth all the pain and heartbreak that's coming your way when you watch them leave the nest." Stay the course, my son, and the rewards will be more than you can ever imagine. Now go to work. You have a family to support now." Dave worked a few hours and wasn't ashamed to say he was ineffective. Arie bounded into his arms when he came to pick her up, rattling on about what she had learned and all the friends she'd made. The director of the facility smiled at him. "Get used to it. She seems really bright, and it might be in your best interest to get her tested in a few years. It will be a challenge to keep her from getting bored. Here's a list of things you'll need to get. If you're uncomfortable, have her mother call us, and we'll go over what to expect. Have a good night. Bye, Arie." She ruffled Arie's hair and walked away, humming. The woman must have really loved her job. Dave got his baby settled into her seat and asked her what she'd like for dinner. "Chicken," she declared. He got a few of the toys Beverly had bought and put her where he could see her while he grilled. He noted she was especially fond of a stuffed dog and wondered how she would like a real one. Her birthday was coming up. The big girls got home and Arie ran to them, laughing. Dev scooped Arie up and placed her on her hip as if she'd been doing it since the child was born. Arie was excitedly trying to tell them about her new school, her friends, and a nice lady named Miss Rose. Dave kissed Beverly and, seeing Marsha looking lost, kissed her on the cheek too. "Get changed, girls. Arie and I made dinner and it'll be ready in 10 minutes. Arie followed them into the house, singing and laughing as she tried to hold both of their hands at the same time. 10 minutes later, they reappeared, all changed into shorts and t-shirts, including Arie. The picnic table was quickly set. Tea and lemonade were poured, chicken was plated, and the veggies were arranged on a large platter. Arie had just gotten back from Bible school at a local church the week before, and she grabbed Dave's hand. "Grace," she said, so they all held hands while Dave thanked God for the food and his girls. That was enough for Arie, and she called out, "Amen," as she pointed to the roasted carrots. Beverly helped her with her plate, chopping everything into small pieces. That night, after Beverly's story time and rocking Arie to sleep, she snuggled next to Dave. She seemed to want to bring something up, but didn't know how. "Beth, we promised to be honest with each other. If something is bothering you, you have to share. Why did we quit going to church?" Short answer, we got too busy and too lazy. Why? What brought that on? Arie, when she insisted we say grace, we need to find a church. It will look good when social services come around investigating us. But I refuse to go just to keep up appearances. I agree it would be good for the girls and for us. We could get involved in activities for people our age and get a new circle of friends. It could be a new support group for us. Let's talk it over with the girls before the weekend and get their thoughts. That made her happy because she shimmied around a bit, and he felt her bare bottom against him. "Lock the door," she whispered as her top flew across the room. They woke to Arie pounding on the door, upset that she couldn't get in. Dave went to the bathroom while Beverly slipped into her robe and opened the door. Arie was crying but soon settled down as Beverly cuddled her. "No more locked doors," she told him that night. "If we need time alone, we'll make sure the door is open when we're done. Got it." They fell into a routine over the next few weeks. Arie never missed a day of waking them up, diving onto the bed for kisses and hugs while she chattered happily about school. Marsha had been taking makeup lessons from Beverly and would get ready for work in her professional dress with proper makeup. She looked a lot older than 18, which worried Dave. Beverly would laugh. "Everyone knows she's the boss's daughter. There may be some interest, and I would be disappointed if there wasn't, as pretty as she is. But it's a professional environment, and Jen and I watch her like a hawk. Still, she's 18, and because of her home situation, she hasn't had many dates. I think she'll be really popular when she does start dating." "Did you ever find that shotgun?" "Yes, and I bought a box of buckshot." They were still laughing when Beverly went down to breakfast. The grandfather finally came to the house after the girls had been with them for 3 weeks. He came when Dave and Beverly were gone. They had taken Arie to the grocery store, and Marsha stayed home to fix dinner. He knocked on the door, and when she answered, he demanded they come home. Marsha tried to reason with him, saying they wanted to stay, and he got really agitated. She thought he might have been drinking. Of course, as soon as they got Arie down for the night, she told them all about it. Dave indicated he would be going over to talk to him the next day, but Beverly talked him out of it. "Let me call Mrs. Ingalls. She'll know what to do." Mrs. Ingalls was the family law expert Susan had recommended, a retired judge who went back into private practice, taking a very limited number of cases. She never had more than 3 clients at a time and was very selective about whom she chose to represent. They found her to be likable, and Arie loved to sit on her lap and play with her long silver hair. But when it came down to it, she was tough as nails. In one way, it should be fairly easy to give custody of the minor to the sister. She's in a nice home, holds a steady job, has no record, no tattoos or piercings, is neat, clean, and quite pretty. If you two get involved, it might get sticky because of your recent separation. You know you can't adopt Marsha because she's of legal age, but there's nothing to stop her from having her name changed to yours or having you formally recognize her as a daughter. On the other hand, you both have good jobs and are in decent financial shape. The fact that you're seeing a counselor and are willing to wait a year before starting the proceedings should help a lot. The grandfather could be tricky, but it will be hard for social services to give him a 4-year-old if Marsha refuses to move back. His age, history, and attitude will work against him. Try not to antagonize him. Allow him access to his granddaughters in a controlled situation. Show him they would be better off with you. If he fights, then we fight. Bev told Mrs. Ingalls about the incident, and she promised to get social services to inspect their home and start the initial interviews. At the same time, they would revisit the grandfather, looking for anything that would make the case for an unfit home. They might even persuade him to let them go due to his age and health. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, keep an eye out, Mrs. Ingalls advised. Social services came out, inspected the house, and interviewed Beverly and Dave. They could tell the visitors were impressed. They had scrubbed the house top to bottom twice in anticipation of the visit. Arie didn't know who they were and was her usual outgoing self. She didn't wait to be asked to see her room, but dragged them up to show her toys and stuffed animals, chattering the whole time. Then she took them outside to see her shiny new swing set and sandbox. Marsha remained calm and level-headed as she described the atmosphere in the house as warm and loving. She sniffled a few times, saying it felt like the first home they'd ever had. Apparently, things did not go so well for the grandfather. Marsha had done most of the cleaning and cooking while they lived with him. So, they found a dirty house and a sink, counter, and table overflowing with dirty dishes and takeout containers. Mrs. Ingalls assured Beverly and Dave that their interview went very well and that it was pretty much a done deal. She was right. A month later, Marsha became Arie's legal guardian. The grandfather never once came to see them. Marsha finally took Arie, escorted by Dave, to see him. He wouldn't let them in, slamming the door in their faces. Arie looked sad for a few minutes before cheering up and demanding they snuggle in the huge hammock Dave had found. It was big enough to hold Beverly, Arie, Dave, and Marsha. They would giggle as they lay down together, with Dave grabbing Beverly and flopping backward, Marsha tossing Arie as she giggled and squealed. Then Marsha would lie down beside Beverly, and they would all rock gently to and fro. It usually put them all to sleep. Beverly would never forget the day Marsha asked if she could snuggle with Dave for a change. Sometimes she found them asleep in the hammock, Arie nestled between them. She took pictures, and Marsha put them on Facebook with the caption, "Snuggling with Dad." Beverly showed it to Dave, and he surprised them all by rushing out of the room. She found him crying in the backyard. He gave her a huge hug and kiss. "Sorry, it's just something I never thought I'd see." He came back in and gave both girls a huge kiss. He would like to say marriage counseling was a walk in the park, and they only had to go a few times. But that wasn't the case. Their counselor was a pretty shrewd woman. She had them tell her in separate sessions why they split up and why they decided to get back together. She shared her insights during the sessions. There were times when they shouted at each other and times they cried and hugged as if they were afraid the other would disappear if they let go. She would guide them through their issues, then prop them back up and analyze everything when they were done. It seemed he harbored deep resentment about her almost unilateral decision not to have children. She resented him for trying to bring it up now and then. In the end, they learned a lot. The primary lesson was that they lost sight of their marriage in the pursuit of their careers. He realized that while he was very proud of what she had accomplished, he resented it, especially when she started minimizing him as she climbed the ladder. She resented that while he was a good salesman, he didn't have the burning desire to get to the top. He almost laughed at that. If we were both like you, the marriage would have been over long ago. That set her on a crying jag, but after she recovered, she understood his point. She hurt him badly when she said she felt he was too passive and felt like she wore the pants in the family. Then he realized she was right about some of her feelings. It was only after she committed the ultimate disrespect to him that he started pushing back. Sometimes they'd come back still upset and not speak much. Arie would sense their moods and jump back and forth, snuggling until they were both in better spirits. Marsha would hover, understandably worried about what would happen to them until they pulled her onto their laps, and Beverly would shower her with love. He would never forget the day he went to pick up Arie from daycare, and she came running to him shouting, "Daddy!" as he picked her up. She had heard the other kids calling their parents Mom and Dad, and decided that was the way it should be. After he got his emotions in check, he told her that if he was Daddy, then Beverly was Mommy. She seemed to understand, jumped down from the truck and ran to Beverly, carrying a cutout dinosaur with little red puffballs glued along its spine. "Mommy, look what I made for you!" Dave honestly thought Beverly might faint. Then the tears came. Marsha and Dave watched for a minute, and she turned to him. "Well done, Dad." Then his tears started. The dinosaur hung in a shadow box on Beverly's office wall until she retired. Beverly stood in the hallway of their house, waiting. Marsha stood by her side, holding her hand. It had been almost 2 years since Dave and Beverly started on the long road back to each other. This was the last step on the path. She heard the music start, and Marsha held the door for her. She was still thinking about the conversation they'd had while they were waiting. "Thanks, Mom. Thank you and Dad for saving us, giving us a loving home, and believing in me. I can't believe I'm going to be a junior in college next year. I promise to do well. After all, I have a heck of a role model to emulate." Beverly hugged her hard, trying not to ruin her makeup by crying. "It's me who should be thanking you. I had just about lost everything. My career was going up in flames. My husband had left me and I had nothing left. Then I came to that cookout to make one more effort to get my life back. I not only got my husband back, but I also got a family as a bonus. Have I told you how much I love you and Arie and how proud I am of you?" Marsha laughed. "Every day. It'll probably take another 30 or 40 years before I get tired of it. Now, straighten that face. It's almost time." She walked through the door to the cheers and claps of their friends. The reverend of the Episcopalian church they had been attending for the last 14 months was standing at the altar, smiling. Their friends from the age-appropriate group they had joined were there. Jen had even flown in with her husband and 5-month-old son. Saul stood beside Dave while Susan, dressed to match, took her place on the opposite side with Marsha. 6-and-a-half-year-old Arie stood there with a basket of rose petals, flanked by their dogs, Sunny and Sugar. Each had a little pillow strapped to their backs. They stood for a minute, enjoying the scene before Dave slowly walked down the red carpet, preceded by Arie spreading rose petals. The dogs were in their usual positions, one step behind her. They joined hands in front of the Reverend and recited their vows again. Beverly got a big surprise when Arie handed Dave her ring. Dave had taken it to the jeweler for cleaning and had a large diamond-encrusted band wrapped around it. She let him slip it on her finger, glancing at the mother's ring the girls had given her for her last birthday. The 2 different stones twinkled in the twilight. A tear slipped down her cheek when the Reverend asked who gave this woman away, and Saul answered, "Their daughter still." It was the 3rd most important day in Dave's life. The first was marrying Beverly the first time. The second was the day Arie's adoption papers were signed, and she got to carry their last name. Marsha broke down when he told her she would have to take their last name too, giving her the papers. All she had to do was file them. The Waxman family was complete. He grinned as he slipped the expensive band on her finger. It symbolized the old with the original setting and a new beginning with the upgrade. He already had the one for their 30th anniversary in mind. If he thought he had a surprise for her, she one-upped him spectacularly after the vows and the kiss. She called for everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming, old friends, and now there is one more thing to celebrate tonight." She turned and took both his hands and said the words he never expected to hear. "Honey, you know I had a doctor's appointment yesterday. It was to confirm something I already knew in my heart. I'm pregnant." Honey, I'm 8 weeks along. I have no idea how it happened, but I consider it a gift from God. Oh, and it's a girl. People started clapping and cheering, and he reacted in a way they never suspected. He fainted. Beverly and Dave sat and watched Arie cross the stage to receive her high school diploma, just as they had watched Marsha do the same for her college degree 10 years earlier. Arie had graduated with honors and would be joining Marsha at the same university. Dave grinned at Marsha while holding his 4-year-old grandson on his lap. Marsha smiled back, holding the twin sister. If Beverly was a terrific mother, she was an even more amazing grandmother. Marsha had inherited her grandfather's house and remodeled it to suit her and her husband. This made it easy for Dave and Beverly to see their grandkids, as a gravel path led from their back door to Marsha's. Dave had already set aside 2 acres between their houses to build Arie a home when the time came. He also bought an empty lot next door for their youngest, Haley, who was always in motion. Haley had followed Arie around since she could walk, and the thought of her hitting puberty scared Dave to death. Maybe it was time to buy a new box of buckshot. Beverly retired at 50, leaving the corporate world with a generous package. She had saved the company and, inspired by Dave, led a successful merger with the South Korean company. The chairman came to oversee the merger and tried to persuade her to take another assignment. As he admired the portraits in her office, Beverly stood firm. I'm entering a new phase of my life. My youngest daughter just turned 11, my middle one is about to start college, and the oldest, well, you know. She grinned. We missed the bus on that one. I still can't believe she went to work for the Koreans. Tell her if it doesn't work out, she and Jin will both be welcomed back, the chairman said. I'll pass it along, but I wouldn't hold out much hope. Jin loves her new position, and Marsha is having a great time. They hired her to show how progressive they are, but she's proved her worth. The owner's granddaughter is even working as her assistant. They both laughed. Well, I had to try. Good luck to you. Send pictures of the grandchildren and think about the consulting position we have. You could work on projects of your choosing. I promise I'll think about it. And you can call or email any time for an opinion. Thank you, sir, for standing by me. It means a lot, Beverly said, hugging him tightly. She knew after a year or so she would consult part-time, as long as it didn't require extended absences. She was fine with it. She figured when the youngest grandchild started school, it would be the right time. Dave looked at Haley as she squirmed. Tone it down, HH, he said, which stood for Hurricane Haley. It's almost over. As she smiled at Dave, he remembered the time he heard she was going to join the family. Bev and Dave had decided to renew their vows after their counseling and court appearances to adopt their girls as a celebration of their renewed marriage and completed family. He was already overwhelmed with emotions when she dropped the bomb on him, pregnant at 38. She said she didn't know how it happened, but suspected an interaction with some cold medicine. Sometimes, she couldn't quite look him in the eye, and he knew it was deliberate. If she had just asked him, he would have been ecstatic, but he suspected she was afraid he'd say no. He fainted dead away when he understood what she told him and all their family and friends. She looked completely panic-stricken when he woke up with his head in her lap. She was crying and apologizing, so he shut her up the most effective way possible. He pulled her head down for a kiss that felt like it lasted a lifetime. After that, she understood he was happy. Dave worried constantly, but Beverly sailed through the pregnancy effortlessly, continuing to work until he insisted she stop 3 weeks before her due date. When Haley was born, Dave was right there with Beverly. He felt an immense joy as he held their newborn daughter, marveling at the tiny fingers wrapped around his. He recorded the look on Beverly's face when she first saw Haley, and whenever he felt stressed or down, he'd watch that video and feel instantly better. Marsha, Arie, and their grandparents, Saul and Susan, were waiting to meet the new baby. They had integrated into the family so seamlessly that many thought they were all related by blood. When they finally got to hold Haley, there were enough happy tears to fill a bathtub. Over the months, a special bond developed between Arie and Haley. Arie had been so young when they adopted her that she only had memories of Dave and Beverly as her parents. When she eventually learned the truth, she was devastated. Beverly comforted her, saying, "You may not be family by blood, honey, but you are family by love. We chose to love you. And I was hooked the first time I saw you play with my diamond necklace. As far as we're concerned, you are our daughter. Nothing will ever change the love we have for you. Hold your head high and remember that your name, Ariana Marie Waxman, was given by two parents who love you very much. Dave worked a few more years after Beverly retired before he joined her. Saul's daughter, who had taken over the company, was struggling. Son's death had hit her hard, leaving her directionless for a while. Beverly stepped in, sharing her own story with Amanda and urging her to focus on her family. When was the last time you surprised your husband with a night of passion? When was the last time you even had dinner with him? This, she waved around the office, is not worth your husband. I almost lost mine, and I'll never forget that pain. Think long and hard, Amanda. Your dad wouldn't want this. He'd tell you to sell the company before you lose your family. He ran this company for decades and rarely missed dinner with you. If he could do it, so can you. Amanda took Beverly's advice, hiring and training staff to handle daily operations. She surprised her husband with a second honeymoon, where they reconnected deeply. She even revealed she had gone off birth control and hoped she was pregnant. Their first son was born almost 9 months later. Once free from work, Beverly and Dave tackled their bucket list. They bought an RV and spent summers traveling around the U.S., often with a grandchild or two. Sometimes Haley joined, but she preferred staying with her older sisters. They spent a month in Crete, which Dave had always wanted to visit. They followed this with trips to Portugal, Spain, Italy, and France, eventually deciding they loved Crete the most and bought a house there. It had grapevines, citrus trees, olive trees, and a lovely pool. They spent half the year in Crete, enjoying visits from family and friends. Marsha and her family spent their vacations in Crete, and Arie stayed a month with friends after her college graduation. Haley hinted at wanting the house for her and 6 friends after high school, but Dave wasn't thrilled with that idea. Beverly learned some local language and often suggested, "Let's get into the pool naked and fool around." Even at 56, Beverly could still rock a bikini when she bothered to wear one. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.